Hey friends, it's Tomer, and I'm once again trying to convince you to dive into your pile of bulk magic cards and assemble some sweet new budget brews. This is 30 commander decks under $30. These are tuned yet highly thematic decks that are ranging in power level, with the lowest power level being at the same level as a modern day precon. They're about precon level, and the highest power level ones are somewhere in the range of like a high bracket 3. Like, they're pretty powerful, and at like a casual table, you probably have to make sure that people are at the right power level to actually handle these type of decks. Now, before we check out the decks, I want to do a quick disclaimer about the price. So at the time of recording, all of the decks are around like $29 to $30 according to MTG Goldfish, which is the price guide that I'm using. But there's 2 points I need to make here. Number one, prices are going to change over time. As the months go by, these prices are going to go up, generally speaking. I found this out myself to my annoyance because a lot of these decks I started building about a couple months ago, and when I went back to update them with the newest sets, I found out that a lot of them went up in price. Some a couple dollars, some like $10. And I found out that there was a big spike on Warhammer cards in the past year, and that was the cause of a lot of the price spikes, the most egregious ones at least, like Tyrant Guard. Woof, look at that price. So point number one, prices are going to go up over time. And point number two is that the prices are going to vary depending on what vendor you're looking at. MTG Goldfish uses prices based on our sponsor, cardkingdom.com, which, by the way, you can go cardkingdom.com/MTGGoldfish and purchase all these sweet cards and also support the channel at the same time. But if you're buying these cards at, say, TCG Player, you're going to get a totally different price point. Same thing if you're in Europe and you're using Card Market, a totally different price point there as well. And none of these decks account for shipping. So again, for example, if you go to TCG Player, you might find cards individually priced very, very low, but you have to buy from multiple vendors, and then the shipping cost is going to be very significant. Or if you buy it from a big vendor, you might pay more for the individual cards, but then you save a lot on shipping. So it really depends on a lot of variables here. So the overall price of these decks are going to vary depending on where you buy these cards and also how much you have to pay for shipping. But unfortunately, that's something I just can't account for. So when I say these decks are about $30, they're about $30 according to MTG Goldfish at the time of this recording. I'm not trying to be clickbait. I'm not trying to mislead anybody. I'm not trying to lie about the prices of these decks. I just have to use some sort of price point. I work for MTG Goldfish. I'm going to be using the MTG Goldfish price guide. But if you want to assemble any of these decks and you want to save money doing so, I highly recommend diving through your own bulk bin before purchasing any of the cards. Or if you have any friends who play Magic and they have a pile of bulk cards, check those bulk cards first too. Or if you have a game store, go through their bulk bins as well. Because all these decks are under $30, so every single card is going to generally be under $1 each in order to hit that goal. So yeah, if you don't mind the time-consuming process of going through bulk, I highly recommend doing this to assemble these decks. Most of the cards are going to be found there. All right, with that long disclaimer out of the way, let's check out the decks. All right, these decks are organized in alphabetical order, so we're starting with Abdel Adrian with Candlekeep Sage as the background. So this is classic Azorius Blink shenanigans. Abdel Adrian, when it ETBs, it exiles any number of non-land permanents you control, and you make that many 1/1 creature soldier tokens exiled this way. And Candlekeep Sage gives Abdel Adrian access to blue, but also when Abdel enters or leaves the battlefield, you also get to draw cards, so it's extra card draw as well. So the game plan here is very simple. We're going to play a bunch of permanents with powerful enter the battlefield or leave the battlefield triggers, then play Abdel Adrian and exile all of those permanents and make that many 1/1 creature tokens exiled this way. And then we flicker Abdel Adrian, bounce Abdel Adrian, and get back all those permanents back onto the battlefield and get to reuse all those powerful enter the battlefield and leave the battlefield triggers over and over again while making a 1/1 token army at the same time. So we're blinking a bunch of different things. We have a lot of really creative ways of drawing cards, like Lembus, for example. It's just ETB, scry 1, draw a card. We have a lot of ETB ramp cards too, like Core Cartographer. And then we have other utility cards like Sun Titan, which is Enter the Battlefield Reanimation. We also have an incredibly powerful removal suite. Reality Acid's probably the meanest one of the bunch. When it leaves the battlefield, the enchanted permanent is Sacrifice, which is just really mean. You put Reality Acid on something, and then you exile the acid with Abdel Adrian, and whatever it was enchanted is now just Sacrifice. Even lands, like it could be very mean. Palace Jailer, ETB, just exile opponent's creatures. Stonehorn Dignitary is not just straight up removal, but it just forces people to skip their combat phase, which is quite mean against combat focused deck. We also have infinite combo potential with Abdel Adrian. Any permanent that blinks target creature that can target Abdel Adrian, and then any instant speed blink spell like Essence Flux. So Abdel Adrian, Feldar Guardian, and Essence Flux can yield, if properly sequenced, can yield infinite enter the battlefield triggers, infinite leave the battlefield triggers, and also create infinite soldier creature tokens, just looping it over and over again. The deck has so much redundancy when it comes to generating card advantage, generating mana advantage, and it's so loaded with interaction too, that it's very difficult to have a bad draw with it. It's also very difficult for your opponents to stop the game plan because all your cards are very resilient to removal, right? Like all your creatures have ETB abilities and stuff. So when they die, it's like, okay, well, I can't blink it, but I already got some value out of it. So it's super resilient, super consistent, and has a lot of interaction to stop faster decks, which makes it just a very powerful deck overall. It's not a super fast deck. It's a very like a slow, grindy style list that does have combo potential. So I would list it on the upper end of my budget brews. It's probably like a very solid bracket 3 deck if we're going to be using the bracket system to power rank these type of decks. It's definitely significantly stronger than your average modern day precon. However, it's not like super like CDH-y or like highly optimized or anything. Like it's not a bracket 4 for sure. I think it's a very consistent bracket 3, a very consistent deck, very resilient to removal, and then it has those surprise infinite combos as well. Next, we got a new deck, Arabella Abandoned Doll. This is essentially go wide Boros with a focus on low power creatures, power 2 or less specifically. As long as you have a lot of creatures with power 2 or less on the battlefield, you swing in with Arabella, you deal a ton of damage to each of your opponents, and you also gain a lot of life in the process. So this is Arabella's like an incremental burn engine in the command zone, but can also just double up as a straight up finisher once you have a critical mass of creatures on the battlefield that are low power. So a lot of Arabella lists are focused straight up on token generation. They just want to fill the board with as many tokens as possible so that Arabella can hit as hard as possible. I'm actually not going in that direction. Like I do have some token generators in the deck, but instead I'm going a very Richard approach to this style of Arabella. Actually, Richard even has an Arabella list, so I took a lot of inspiration from his own list, and I'm focusing on low power creatures, yes, but I want to make sure that they have a lot of utility to the table. They're not just like pooping out tokens for the sake of it. I want them to stand alone as useful pieces in a grander puzzle. So Ornithopter Paradise, I'm running a lot of mana dorks. Yeah, they die to removal or whatever, but they provide mana advantage for the deck, and also they pump up Arabella's ability. Wall of Omens, all these like cheap cantrip creatures, they add consistency to the deck. They can be chump blockers when we need them to be. We don't really care if they die, but just them sitting on the battlefield means Arabella does more and more damage. And then also ETB creatures with low power and just have other sorts of utility like Skyclave Apparition. We just have more removal available to us. So those are all the type of creatures that I'm really focusing on with this list. And then we also have other cards that specifically reward you for having low power. So Arabella herself is going to give us the biggest payoff, just dealing a lot of damage and gaining us a lot of life whenever she swings. Goblin Tunneler and similar effects give Arabella evasion, because Arabella's attack is an attack trigger, and it's a very small creature, so it can't really attack properly without evasion. So Goblin Tunneler and similar cards give her evasion. Also, our other small creatures evasion. Welcoming Vampire draws us cards, and Angelic Sellsword just poops out a lot more small creatures and just poops out a lot of creatures in general as we're playing our small little creatures. Then to close out the game, I am running some mass token generators that are suited for the mid to late game, and I'm also focusing specifically on ones that can do it at instant speed. I highly value instant speed for my token makers because if you just like make a bunch of tokens at sorcery speed, especially if they don't have haste, then all of your opponents are suddenly forced to deal with your board, either by shooting off a board wipe or something before you get to properly utilize them. By doing it at instant speed, though, you get around that. You avoid your opponents having that information that you're trying to swing in for lethal next turn. But also, it lets you be more flexible with your mana, right? Instead of casting your Secure the Wastes on that turn, for example, maybe somebody pops off a board wipe, and you instead use that mana that you have held up to cast a spell that makes all your stuff indestructible instead, and delay the Secure the Waste instead. So it gives instant speed, gives you a lot of flexibility on when you want to try to go for the win. So Secure the Waste is really good. White Sun Zenith is really good. And I'm also throwing in extra combats like Overpowering Attack. We want to swing in with Arabella. That's our main win condition. So if we manage to hit people with Arabella and then Overpowering Attack, just 3 more mana, we take an extra combat. That's another round of Arabella damage, and also swinging with our other creatures as well too. And that's usually going to be enough to close out the game. Now, what I find with the deck list is it's incredibly resilient. It has a lot more interaction than you would think in a typical Arabella list that you can see on EDH Rec or whatever. Like, we have a lot of board wipes. I think we have at least 4, I think like 4 to 5. And all of them are basically asymmetrical ones, like Expel the Interlopers. All our creatures are like 0 to 2 power. So Expel the Interlopers could just like kill everything power 3 or greater, and we're having a grand old time. We're also using the Fair to Fairies Purse Protection. It saves us from a possible death, but also it saves our board, but also it creates 4 2/2 bird creature tokens at the same time as well at instant speed. So it also fuels Arabella. And then we have like other protection spells like Glorious Protector, which works really, really well with all our creatures with ETB effects. We get like instant speed, put the protector down, exile all our ETB creatures, save them from our board wipe, and then when they come back, when the protector dies, we get to reuse all those ETB triggers. So this deck is actually like really, really solid. I think it's quite different from your typical Arabella list that is like focused just on going as aggro as possible. This is much a slower, more interactive version of Arabella, and it's trying to kind of slow roll its win and then try to win out of nowhere at instant speed by putting down like a Secure the Waste or whatever, having an instant lethal army, and then swinging with Arabella afterwards. I'd say high bracket 2, maybe like mid bracket 3. Next, we got one of my favorite artifact pairings. It's Armix Ich-Tekik. This is Golgari artifacts. And what I love about this so much is that artifacts are primarily in blue and red, and Golgari artifacts is just very different. So you use a very different card pool to work with, and it works really, really well. So Armix provides removal to the deck. Whenever it's attacking, you can discard a card and then start picking off opposing creatures when you need to. And then Ich-Tekik brings the muscle to the table. Whenever your artifacts are going to the graveyard from the battlefield, you put +1/+1 counters on Ich-Tekik and all golem creatures you control. Armix itself is even a golem, so it benefits from this ability. So basically, they kind of feed well into each other. Armix wants to have artifacts in the graveyard because it fuels its removal ability, and Ich-Tekik wants artifacts to go into the graveyard from the battlefield to grow your army. So we're going to be focusing on artifacts that we want to play and then sacrifice them for value to fulfill both the synergies of Armix and Ich-Tekik at the same time. So the type of cards we're looking at are either artifacts that sacrifice themselves for value. So like Haywire Might is removal that you want to sacrifice. Hilda's Crown of Winter, fantastic card draw that also sacrifices itself. And then Smoke Bomb is a really cute way of protecting yourself from removal and also making something unblockable, and it also sacrifices itself. And then we also have a bunch of artifacts that want to sacrifice themselves. So Heaped Harvest, for example, and Junk Diver, these are sacrifice fodder in artifact form. And then we're running a bunch of cards that sacrifice artifacts for further value, usually to draw cards. Stuff like Tyrion's Journal, for example. You sacrifice another artifact, you draw a card. Very simple. So when you sacrifice Heaped Harvest, for example, you get to double ramp and you get to draw a card, or Junk Diver, you get to return something from the graveyard and you get to draw a card. So that's the type of gameplay experience of this deck. It's very like artifact aristocratsy almost. And then we have a lot of other cards that support artifacts in particular in Golgari colors, which, you know, you just don't get to see them very often because, again, we're outside of red and blue. So Saren's Steel Seeker is great card advantage and also ways of filling your graveyard. Demonic Junker is a really cool removal spell, and Phyrexian Scriptures can be a one-sided board wipe with its Chapter 2 ability. Most of our creatures are artifacts, so most of our opponent's creatures die, and most of our stuff survives. It's really cool and thematic. And then we also have some golems in the deck. Not that many, because most of the golems kind of suck. But like Cradle Clearcutter, for example, when we're growing it with Ich-Tekik, it taps for more and more mana. And then Triplicate Titan, I just love this as a big old stupid finisher. Flying Vigilance Trample, it just gets huge. Well, more huge. I love to grow with Ich-Tekik. And then we also have some aristocrat finishers too. Agent of the Iron Throne is so good in a partner deck because both our commander creatures have its abilities. So if we have Ich-Tekik and Armix on the battlefield and Agent on the Iron Throne, whenever an artifact or creature goes to the graveyard, each of our opponents are losing 2 life instead of 1, which is just, it's so good. So overall, this is a really unique style of artifact deck. It's Golgari artifacts. I think it's very cute. It has a very strong aristocrats feel to it. It has a lot of interaction pieces, but everything it's doing is pretty darn fair, I would say. So power level wise, I would say it's like high bracket 2, very low bracket 3, so like a 2+, maybe? Next up, we got Esper Auras with Arna. Arna has a really powerful ability. Whenever a modified creature you control attacks, you double the number of each kind of counter on it. And then for each non-token permanent attached to it, you create a token as a copy of that permanent attached to that creature. So this is an aura deck. So whenever you have auras attached to Arna or other creatures and you attack with them, for each of those, you get an extra copy token of that aura attached to it. So that's what we're trying to do, is we're trying to load up on auras on all our creatures, Arna and our other creatures, swing in with them, and then double up on all those auras. So the type of auras we're trying to double up on are typically ones that have powerful ETB effects or just have powerful effects in general. So like Nerd Rage, ETB draws 2 cards and also acts as a finisher when you have enough cards in your hand. Chains of Custody, ETB, removes, exiles an opposing creature. Hyena Umber, just a good card. It adds some protection to whatever it's enchanted. So having extra copies of that is always nice, like then your creatures just survive additional board wipes. And also this is an Enchantress deck. This is an Aura deck. So we have a lot of support cards available to us and they're very, very powerful. Pearl Ear makes a lot of our auras and enchantments in general cost way, way less. It's a huge mana discount. Entity Tracker draws us cards whenever we're playing our auras. And also it even counts the aura tokens being generated by Arna because it's not a cast trigger. It's an enter the battlefield trigger. Same thing with Doomlake Giant. Whenever our auras are entering the battlefield, we just one-sided board wipe all of our opponents. Like they just can't have creatures on the battlefield as long as Doomlake Giant's on the battlefield too. So these cards are incredibly powerful. And then we also have a variety of finishers. Twin Blade Blessing, just whatever big creature now has double strike. But even better is stuff like Ethereal Armor. It gets +1/+1 for each enchantment you control, and we're going to have a lot of auras on the battlefield. And then having like doubling the amount of Ethereal Armors we have with Arna's ability, with its attack trigger, just means opponents are like super dead. And as we're making all these auras enter the battlefield, we're making a giant army with Archon of Sun's Grace too. I can't overstate how powerful auras are as an archetype, especially on a budget. We have just like so many powerful payoff cards. Winds of Wrath is basically a one-sided board wipe for us because we just put auras on all our creatures, and then we kill everything that doesn't have an enchantment on them. Brilliant Restoration, if we get board wiped or something successfully, we can just mass reanimate all the auras back onto our creatures. Same thing with Mantle of Ancients, like one of the best cards in the entire archetype. It does also the mass reanimation thing too, and also just makes the creature enormously big. Just excellent cards all around. Yeah, this card, this deck is very, very strong. I would say it's a very solid bracket 3. It just does really powerful things, and it can also kill people incredibly fast. Braids Arisen Nightmare is peak mono black aristocrats. At our end step, we get to sacrifice an artifact, creature, enchantment, land, or planeswalker, and if we do, each opponent may sacrifice a permanent that shares a card type with it, and for each opponent who doesn't, that player loses 2 life and you draw a card. So typically what happens with Braids is we play Braids, then we sacrifice something to Braids at end step. Each opponent loses 2 life and we draw 3 cards. Like 9 times out of 10, that is what's happening, unless we have to like sacrifice a creature and somebody's like playing a token deck and they don't mind like sacrificing a 1/1 to stop us from drawing a card. But typically speaking, Braids is that simple. It's like a 3 mana creature that every single turn draws us 3 cards, and our opponents lose 2 life each, and just it facilitates sacrifice engines. It's a really, really good, really, really efficient card. So the types of things we're going to be sacrificing to Braids, we're going to sacrifice artifacts like Prize Statue. These are things that we want to be sacrificing, by the way. Prize Statue, it makes a treasure when it enters the battlefield, but then when we sacrifice it, we get to be rewarded with another treasure, which is awesome. Treacherous Blessing, 3 mana enchantment that ETB draws us 3 cards, and then we actually want to get rid of it because it's going to be draining our life total. And then we also have a bunch of just sacrifice fodder that doesn't really care if it lives or dies, like Elderfang Disciple, or anything with like an ETB trigger or a leave the battlefield trigger. Elderfang Disciple just makes everybody discard a card, so it's like card advantage for us, and then it's just sitting around and we just sacrifice the Braids for extra value. So this is a classic Aristocrats deck, and we have just a lot of really classic payoffs for sacrificing creatures, especially. So Voldaren, a Bloodcaster, for example, makes us blood tokens whenever we're sacrificing stuff. And then, by the way, we can sacrifice those blood tokens to Braids and draw even more cards, by the way. Zulapur Cutthroat just drains our opponents to death. Sifter of Skulls makes us a bunch of Eldrazi Scions that we could then sacrifice as well and also ramp with it. And then for our finishers, classic mono black Aristocrats finishers. We're all about the drain, baby. So Bastion of Remembrance drains, Sir Conrad drains, and then also Grey Merchant, classic Gary, just Omega level drains all of our opponents. And then if we can reanimate it a couple of times, that's pretty much GG for any opponent. So Braids is simple, iconic, and very, very efficient at what it's doing. It's not doing anything complicated. It's not doing anything groundbreaking in mono black. It's playing to mono black's greatest strengths, and it's doing it hyper efficiently. It's just a massive card draw engine doing aristocrat things. So if you like aristocrats, you like drawing cards, Braids is definitely doing that very, very well. The fact that it just draws so much so quickly, it gets out of hand so fast, I think would make it just like a very solid bracket 3. Next, we got my baby boy, little Edric, Spy Master of Trust. I have, obviously, a paper version of this deck sitting with me, too. It's upgraded from this, but this is an excellent starting point. Whenever a creature deals combat damage to one of your opponents, its controller may draw a card. So you're helping the table, really. So this deck is basically just like Simic, weenies, tempo, aggro. You just play a bunch of like small little dudes with evasion, punch people in the face, draw oodles of cards, way more than if your opponents do, and then use that to leverage yourself to a victory. So the bulk of the deck is just 1 mana, 1/1s that have evasion. Just 1/1 flyers, 1/1s that have some sort of evasion like Spire Tracer or whatever. You just flood the board with these, you smash people in the face, and then you draw a bunch of cards and you play more of them. That's like the bulk of the deck. And then when we're drawing oodles of cards, we're drawing so many cards that we can just be super card inefficient as much as possible. So stuff like foil suddenly becomes really, really good. It's a free counter spell as long as we're discarding an island as well as another card from our hand. It's like super card inefficient, but when we're drawing so many cards, it doesn't matter. Snapback too. I'm running Snapback in this deck. It's like just like a you could call it a bad unsummon, but it's a free unsummon. You just have to exile an extra blue card in your hand. Very happy to do so when I'm drawing like 6+ cards a single turn. And then we also have very cute like counter magic like Abjure, for example. We have a bunch of 1/1 flyers on the battlefield that we don't really care about. Like, sure, they draw us cards or whatever, but they're not a big investment for us. So if we need to counter a spell, we just, for 1 mana, we can sacrifice one of those flyers and counter it for 1 mana, which is really sweet. And then to win the game, we can grow up our entire team with stuff like Scale Up. We can chain together extra turn spells. Not that many because we're on a budget. But we have a couple extra turn spells, and that usually means our opponents kind of die after a couple extra combat swings. And then we could also do something like drop down a Druid's Repository, swing in, and generate stupid amounts of mana and just dump our hand super, super efficiently. And then we could overwhelm the table much, much faster that way. So the deck is incredibly powerful, oppressively strong sometimes, you could say. I would not play it against precons. I think that'd be very mean. This is definitely a bracket 3 deck, high bracket 3, maybe very low bracket 4 even. It doesn't have like the super hyper efficient cards, the super stapley cards like Fierce Guardianship and stuff like that really make it like a really high bracket 4 or whatever. But it's definitely the upper level of like bracket 3. Like if people are playing like casual precon level decks, this is not appropriate. Do not do that. But if you want to play something a little bit more cutthroaty, Edric's definitely super fun. Next, we've got a new commander from Dragonstorm. This is Eshki Dragonclaw. This is basically like a Teamer Voltron deck. It comes with like 3 good keywords: Vigilance, Trample, Ward 1, and it's a 4/4 already. And then what it wants to do is it wants you to cast a creature spell and non-creature spell each turn. When you do that, you get to draw a card and put 2 +1/+1 counters on Eshki. So this is a great chassis for a Voltron deck because it grows itself. It has Vigilance and Trample, so it's a great blocker and a great attacker. And the Ward 1 is kind of nice. Like, it's not going to save you from target removal, but it gives you a little bit of breathing room, just a little bit of extra safety net, which I quite enjoy. So it's just like a very, very consistent deck of card draw, self-growing, and just easy smashies while also being able to protect yourself, which is a really nice combination. So the type of cards that I typically see for Eshki decks, at least the original round of decks, because this is a very recent commander, I've noticed like the most common trend is to go like full on an adventure deck. And that's a really unique way of doing that because the adventure sides are always non-creature spells, and then the other side is a creature. So you could like cast the adventure side and then immediately cast the creature side, and you fulfilled already the requirement of Eshki to draw a card and get +1/+1 counters. However, I did notice that most adventure cards are kind of really, really mana inefficient, so they don't really seem really good to like go all in on. Instead, I picked a couple of like the best ones and just ran those instead, like Scalding Viper and Kellen. These are cheap enough that you could like utilize their both sides very effectively. And then there's also other cards that like are creatures, but they also allow you to cast non-creatures at the same time too, like Songcrafter Mage is also excellent here. And then the rest of the deck is like Voltron-y stuff. Since we're going for Voltron and we're smashing your opponents consistently every single turn for combat damage, all the free running cards are just like super good here. Viewpoint Synchronization is like Omega level ramps. Aqueous Form is just excellent evasion for 1 mana. And then Dragonclaw Strike is like both Voltron-y because it doubles the amount of damage we're doing, but also takes out problematic creatures at the same time too. Really, really excellent. And then we also have a lot of really cool interaction pieces. Stuff like Foundation Breaker. It counts as a creature spell even if you evoke it for just 1 mana and then blow up something. And we have Thematic Voltron counter spells like Repulsive Mutation. Eshki is going to be really, really big. So we don't even have to dump any X mana into it. Just for 2 mana, we can counter basically whatever we want because Eshki is going to be really, really big. And then also we have some really cool interaction pieces like Hunter's Bow, for example, giving Eshki reach is actually really, really nice. So the reach in Ward 2 is really, really good in Voltron, because now suddenly our opponents have to pay Ward 1 and Ward 2. And then reach on top of Vigilance is just a really nice combination, because now we can even block flyers very well. And it ETBs immediately attaches to Eshki and also removes an opponent's creatures. I think Hunter's Bow is very underrated, honestly. Finally, to end the game, the best way to do that is extra combats. Not only does that mean we double the damage output of Eshki, but also it means we double the value of her triggered ability, because her triggered ability happens at the beginning of combat. So if we have more combats, that means more rounds of growing Eshki and also drawing more cards. So again, overpowering attack. Free running cards are just excellent here. Last Night Together is another just cheap extra combat, and then Aki Battle Squad is an extra combat attached to a creature, and Eshki modifies herself, so she meets the criteria very easily. The deck is new and very, very consistent. I would say that that's the key word about this Voltron deck. It's not the most explosive. It doesn't win as quickly as other Voltron decks can. However, it's slow and steady, ultra consistent, very good keywords attached to it, and yeah, just a very solid deck. I would say it's a high 2, bracket 2, or a mid to low bracket 3. It's definitely not the strongest Voltron deck out there, but it's super, super consistent at what it's doing. Next, we have a very unique Simic commander. This is like Simic Scry Fall. It's like Scry matters, Lanefall matters, and also a little bit of Elves matters too. This is Galadriel of Lothlorien. Whenever the ring tempts us, we get to scry 3 as long as we choose somebody other than Galadriel as a ring bearer. And then whenever we scry, we reveal the top card of our library. If a land is revealed this way, we get to put it onto the battlefield tapped. So we're all about scrying, right? The more we scry, the more we ramp with Galadriel, and everything kind of flows from that idea. So the way we're scrying, we have obviously ring tempts you cards like Birthday Escape, draw a card, then probably ramp out a land as well of Galadriel. That's just amazing for 1 mana. Elrond is another all-star. We're a pretty creature-heavy deck, so as we're just playing creatures, we get to scry a whole bunch, and then if we play 2 creatures in a single turn, the ring tempts us, and we get to scry 3 of Galadriel and definitely hit a land off it. And then Cryptic Annelid is also just like high-key amazing, because it's 3 instances of scry. That means we have 3 chances of ramping out a land with Galadriel just whenever it enters the battlefield, which is really, really bananas, really good. And then we have some scry payoffs other than Galadriel. So Elrond makes all of our creatures really, really big. Elegant just straight up turns all our scrying into card draw, which is amazing. And Lost Isle Calling is a really unique way of taking an extra turn eventually when we scry enough. We also have a Lanes Matter payoff as well too. So we have a lot of Lanefall type cards. Retreat to Coralhelm is the most fun in the entire deck, because whenever we play a land, we get to scry 1, which could potentially, put another land into the battlefield of Galadriel, which will allow us to scry 1 again, and just keep doing that over and over again. It's just like, it's super fun. Avenger of Zendikar is, again, just a very classic payoff when we're doing so much lane falling. And Tatyova draws us cards and gains us life. Nothing wrong about that. That Sober is really, really good. And then finally, on top of that, on top of the Scry Matters and Landfall Matters, we also have a very strong elf sub-theme going on too. Elvish War Master poops out elves and can act as a finisher later on in the game. Elvish Archdruid gives a little bit of an anthem and taps for a ton of mana. And then the other Galadriel also gives us a payoff for elves entering the battlefield. We get to either be tempted by the ring or draw cards, all of which is great. And then, yeah, so this deck is a very fair deck overall. It's doing a bunch of really, really cool things, very unique things, but it's not very oppressive at anything it's doing, honestly. I think this is a very solid, 2. Like one of maybe a little bit stronger than a modern day precon, but not by too much. It can sit at the table with precons and be absolutely fine with them. It's not super oppressive or anything. So yeah, solid bracket 2 deck. Really, really unique, but not like ultra powerful or anything. Next up, we got Boros Multicolor Matters with General Ferrous Rockerick. It says whenever you cast a multicolored spell, create a 4/4 red and white golem artifact creature token. Whenever we cast a Boros spell, basically, anytime we cast a Boros spell, they always come with a giant creature token attached to it. It's a 4/4, it's an artifact, it's a creature, it's ready to rumble. So yeah, Ferrous Rockerick is just like an army in a can, almost literally. Yeah, so the type of things we're going to be doing with it, we're just going to be casting a bunch of good Boros spells, right? Just if it's a good Boros spell, it's in this deck essentially. Shutdown of the Skulls draws a lot of cards. Eowyn is removal. Reconstruct History is reanimate or recursion rather. All of these all just do a thing really well, and then also come with a 4/4 attached to it, which is really good. And then we also have obviously a lot of payoffs for making our 4/4 creature token army. Niali, for example, gives them all double strikes, so now they're hitting for 8 damage instead of just 4, which is ridiculous. And then when we're dealing damage to opponents, we're also drawing cards at the same time. Tokasia's Welcome, whenever the first golem enters the battlefield on each person's turn, we're drawing a card. And then Invasion of Ravnica, the first side is already good removal, but then when we flip it over, whenever we're casting multicolored spells, we're also just drowning in card advantage too. So just excellent card. Just bananas. Really, really good. Then we also got finishers. Like, obviously, the 4/4 creatures by themselves are just going to win us the game eventually if we cast enough of them. But we can speed up the process with stuff like Sentinel Seraph Lions. It's an anthem and also just domes people for a ridiculous amount of damage. Adriana gives all of them melee. And then Response Resurgence. Response is removal. Resurgence is just an extra combat. So just swing in, make another golem, obviously, and then swing in and do a whole bunch of damage. This deck is surprisingly aggressive while basically being a control deck. Like, if you look at the 99, you'll be like, oh, this is just like a pile of like card draw and removal and interaction. But all those pieces come with just 4/4 creatures if our commander is out. And if our commander just sticks around, we kind of just overwhelm the table pretty quickly, honestly. So I would say this deck overall is kind of like a high 2, maybe a low 3. Next, we have a fringe EDH pairing. It's Haldan and the goodest boy, Pako. This is a very powerful deck that doesn't really need to do anything in the 99 for it to be powerful because the commanders are just so busted. So Pako is the star of the show. It starts as a 3/3 with haste, immediately attacks, has an attack trigger, exiles the top card of everybody's library, and it gets +1/+1 for each non-creature card exiled this way. So it can grow anywhere between 0 and +4/+4, one for each opponent if it's a 4-player game. So it can be swinging in immediately with haste as a 7/7, which is already bonkers. But it gets better. If Haldan's on the battlefield, you can cast the non-creature spells exiled with Pako's ability. So it's just insane card advantage of Haldan. And then Pako is just insane beatdown of death with Pako. It's super, super fun. And then the rest of the deck is just facilitates the Pako beatdown, essentially, because Haldan's giving you extra cards. You don't really need to focus on anything else. So the thing we want to do, number one, is we want to get Haldan Pako out, well, especially Pako out, as quickly as possible. The faster we get Pako out, the faster we start punching people in the face, and the less opportunity our opponent has to set up an answer to our rampaging doggo. So just like any ramp is going to work for us, Font of Fertility is fine as a 1-drop, but even better, we're running like 52 lanes in this deck. So we have like Summer Bloom, just ramps us 3 lanes. It's super, super good. And Overgrowth, it's a 3-drop, taps for 2 though. So, I mean, this is really good ramp. It gets us our Pako out the next turn, essentially. So yeah, just ramp. And then when Pako's actually on the battlefield, we just protect Pako. That's all we want to do. So we want to have ways of giving it evasion. So Canopy Cover is really good at that, but also essentially gives it hexproof. And then Gaia's Gift is another way of protecting Pako that's really good. It gives it indestructible and trample. So if there's any chump blockers, Pako runs over it as well. And then we have like cute counter spells too, like Spell Rupture, for example. Pako is going to be huge. So for 2 mana, we just basically counter anything as long as Pako's on the battlefield. Awesome card. And then to close out the game, Chain Reaction is a very funny card here because it's a board wipe, right? It kind of resets the board, except Pako gets so big so quickly. Oftentimes, you can use Chain Reaction to just wipe the board of opposing creatures, and Pako actually still lives, and then you just kill people that way. Temur Battle Rage is another card that just says I win, essentially, because Pako, again, gets huge, and this gives a double strike and trample, so that's GG for one opponent. And then again, overpowering attack. The free running cards are just good with Voltron decks. You're just going to keep seeing them over and over again. An extra combat means probably 2 people are dead, and also double the attack triggers with Pako. So the deck is really good. I actually have a version of it, a sleeveless Pako deck that's actually cheaper than this. This is actually an upgraded version of the one that I'm actually running. Mine is a sleeveless Pako Haldan deck that it started as $10. I've added a couple cards over time, but I still think it's like a $15 deck or something, my own version. So you gotta imagine that the $30 version is probably going to be pretty spicy. This deck I would not play against precons. It's much stronger than a precon. It's very oppressive, very fast, but it's very solidly, at least this version, is very solidly bracket 3. It's not like a high-powered deck, and my version has like 60 or so lands, so the deck is mostly just lands. So it's not like, it could be a lot more powerful, is what I'm trying to say. This version, too, is 52 lands. I think you could probably fiddle with the price a little bit better. There's some cards here that are like $2 or something. You could probably replace those for similar effects and get the lane count down further. I don't think you ever want to go below like 45 lanes or like 44 lanes. I think that's a good number for it. 52 is a little bit excessive. But yeah, you just hit land drops, ramp, protect Pako, and then you'll just win the game eventually. If Pako can't be answered, you eventually just win. Yeah, so it's definitely a solid bracket 3. Maybe a high bracket 3 even, but it's not like bracket 4 or anything, just because it's the budget's not high enough yet for it. Next up, another favorite of mine, and this is Hamza, Guardian of Irration. And this is a go wide deck that focuses on putting a +1/+1 counter on everything, because the payoff here is that not only does Hamza get cheaper, it costs 1 less to cast for each creature you control with a +1/+1 counter on it, but also creature spells you cast cost 1 less to cast for each creature you control with a +1/+1 counter on it. So the idea is to flood the board with creatures, put 1 +1/+1 counter on them each, and then cast Hamza for very cheap, or recast Hamza for very cheap, and then just start churning out a bunch of creature spells for very, very cheap when Hamza's on the battlefield. So we start the game basically trying to develop a board state and putting counters on our creatures as efficiently as possible. So Mikaeus is a great one at doing it, just taps and puts a counter on everything. Warden of the Grove is another new card that's great at doing it, and Legorin is another way of just putting counters on stuff. We don't need to put a lot of counters on stuff, just one will do. One is sufficient. And these are just like the most efficient ways of doing it and getting the ball rolling. And then once we actually have Hamza on the battlefield and we have counters on our creatures, the fun truly begins. We start playing really expensive, splashy, bomby creatures, essentially, for really cheap. Like Dawnglade Region, we can cast for just 2 green once we have 5 creatures with counters on them and Hamza on the battlefield. All our stuff has hexproof. We have the Monarchy. We're chilling with an 8/8. Torsten's probably the best card in the 99, honestly. The deck has like 45 or so creatures in the deck, so we're just going to... It's like almost all creatures and lands, essentially. So Torsten just like draws us like not 7 cards, but like 6 or 5 very consistently for as low as 2 mana. And Artisan and Kozilek, we can cast as low as 0 mana, reanimate, and then we have a 10/9 with Annihilator too. Very, very fun. And then we also obviously have other payoffs for having counters on everything. Bulwark Ox gives stuff with counters indestructible and hexproof. Inspiring Call gives everything indestructible and draws us cards. And Kami of Whispered Hopes, the more counters we put on Kami of Whispered Hopes, the more mana it taps for. And also it's a hardened scales. Whenever we put a counter on something, we put an additional one on it. So that's nice as well too. So the deck is very straightforward +1/+1 counters. Hamza is a great payoff at it. And as you can see, I believe it's 45 creatures. Yes, 45 creatures in the deck. It's very creature heavy because obviously the more creatures we have on the battlefield, the more creatures we have in our library, the more creatures we can cast at a discounted rate with Hamza's ability once we get going. I actually made a paper version of this deck, and I gave it away to charity in our last year's charity stream. And the person who won it actually was Carl from Card Market, so I gave it to him. And he said he doesn't play it that much because it's too strong. I would say it's not the strongest budget brew I've ever made, just because it can have consistency issues. You need to have creatures on the battlefield with +1/+1 counters on them, and then Hamza starts getting the ball rolling. It's not too hard to do, but there is a little bit of a hoop you have to jump through. And it is disruptible, I guess. I would say it's like high bracket 2, or like mid bracket 3. Let's just say bracket 3 to be fair. Or to be safe. It's not like super insanely strong, but it's definitely a very, very explosive deck, especially, again, in tables lower in interaction, I would say. Okay, now we have a deck that is straight up bad. Not because the commander is bad. The commander is very, very strong. I just built it in a very memey way. So Helga Skittish Seer says, whenever you cast a creature spell with mana value 4 or greater, you draw a card, gain 1 life, and put a +1/+1 counter on Helga. Awesome. Very strong. And then on top of that, you can tap it to generate X mana of any one color, where X is Helga's power. So it starts at 1 and then goes up from there as long as Helga's growing. You spend this mana only to cast creature spells with mana value 4 or greater, or creature spells with X in their mana cost. So this is just a deck that focuses on creatures with mana value 4 or greater. You cast them, you draw cards, you grow Helga, Helga taps for even more mana. It's a very powerful commander, but I went the meme route. I had an idea in my head, and I don't know if it worked, but you tell me. Well, what I did is I went for artifacts. I went for affinity for artifact creatures, specifically. So like Mirror Enforcer, Thought Monitor, Aethersworn Sphinx. These are all just like very expensive, high mana value artifact creatures that have affinity for artifacts, so you can cast them for a lot less mana if you have artifacts on the battlefield. That's the gimmick here, folks. So ideally, you have a bunch of artifacts on the battlefield, and then you cast like Mirror Enforcer for as little as 0 mana, but you still trigger Helga. Thought Monitor you can cast for as little as 1 mana, and Aethersworn Sphinx as little as 2 mana. And, you know, these are good cards by themselves even, like Thought Monitor ETB draws 2, the Sphinx Cascades for a very high amount. So in theory, this can work very, very well. And then the other way we're trying to increase our affinity count, as not only do we run like actual artifacts like Solemn Simulacrum, which is also 4 mana, it triggers Helga, but we also have creatures that poop out artifacts very, very efficiently. Lonus, for example, and Samewise, for example. Whenever non-token creatures are entering the battlefield, we get to make an artifact token that comes along with them. So those are ways to supercharge our affinity for artifact count. And then we have other just cute things that work well with Helga in general, outside of the meme artifact affinity theme. Kiora, for example, whenever we're having big creatures enter the battlefield, we draw cards, but more importantly, Kiora and a whole bunch of other cards in the deck can untap Helga. So Helga is going to be tapping for tons of mana, ever increasing snowballing amounts even. And then you can untap her with Kiora and keep the ball rolling. And we have a bunch of other cards to do the same thing. We also have a couple cards that you can cast for free, but also trigger Helga, like Skyshroud Cutter. Yes, Skyshroud Cutter, Commander All-Star. You can cast it for 0 mana and still trigger Helga and draw a card and gain life and grow her and you know, do fun things like that. And then like other things have alternate costs, like Muldrifter is a 5 mana value spell that we're going to evoke for just 3 mana, and it will still trigger Helga. So yeah, that's the deck. It's a meme. It's affinity for artifacts. I honestly don't know how good the deck actually is. I didn't play test it. I have a feeling it might fall a little bit flat, or it could be absolutely glorious. I might be a mad genius. Who knows? Yeah, definitely the deck could be stronger, I would say, if it had a higher budget, number one, obviously. And number two, you probably got rid of the artifact for affinity for artifact thingy, but like, what's the fun in that? Let's live a little, you know? So I would say this is either just a solid 2, maybe even like a low 2. Or it could be low-key strong and a 3, maybe? I don't know. You tell me. What do you think about Helga? Okay, we go from memes to actually very, very strong. This is Heliod the Radiant Dawn. This is a commander that I piloted on a Commander Clash like 2 months ago or so, and it is a terror. It is a menace. The funny thing is that, so this is a flip creature, and the front side actually does stone cold nothing in our deck. We have literally one enchantment in our deck. We don't care about the front side whatsoever. It's all about the backside. The backside says you can cast spells as though they had flash, and spells you cast cost 1 less to cast for each card your opponents have drawn this turn. So if we cast spells on our opponent's turn after their draw phase, all our spells cost 1 less already. So the idea here is that we're actually going to give our opponents extra cards. And then that's going to fuel our huge mana discount. Like if we give each opponent 1 card, our opponents are giving us an additional 3 mana discount to cast their spells and just have a wild, stupid turn. And that's all this deck is. So step 1, we give everybody a lot of cards. Vision Skynes, for example, 2 mana. Everybody draws 2 cards. We get a 6 mana discount on all our spells with Vision Skynes. Days Undoing, we have Wheels as well. So everybody gets a full new grip, and then we get a huge mana discount, like 21. Cut a Deal even is very, very good here too. So we're just drawing everybody cards. And then when we have a huge discount, the fun begins. We're running a lot of mana rocks, and these mana rocks are essentially rituals in our deck, because when we have a mana discount of 3 or greater, Commander Sphere costs 0 mana and immediately taps for mana for us. So it actually, casting that spell actually puts us up a mana casting it, which is silly. Same thing with Gilded Lotus. If we have a mana discount of 5 rolling on, then we can cast this for 0 mana, and then we tap it immediately for 3 extra mana, which is silly. And then we just start chaining together even more card draw. So we're going up in mana by casting our mana rocks for 0 mana, drawing our opponents even more cards and ourselves at the same time. And what we're looking for is a finisher. So Psychosis Crawler is 1 finisher. If we're drawing like half our deck in a single turn, Psychosis Crawler just kills everybody. Finale of Glory, if we have a huge mana discount at instant speed, we can just flood the board with a game-winning army, then untap for our own turn and swing in with it. Same thing with White Sun's Twilight. We can just clear the board of all creatures and then untap and then swing in, and everybody dies. This deck is scary strong. It's even more powerful if your opponents don't know what to expect. Like on Commander Clash, our opponents, my opponents did not know how powerful Heliod was. They caught wind of it once I flipped it over, and they're like, oh no. But it was too late. Like, this deck draws so many cards, it has so much interaction, and it fights in such a weird axis that it's kind of hard for your opponents to stop it once, you know, you flipped Heliod and protected it. Yeah, it's a scary deck. It also has so much mana rocks that even if Heliod dies, you can recast it a couple times. It's fine. Yeah, this deck is silly good. This deck is silly good. It's definitely like a 3+ on the bracket scale, I would say. It's the 3+. It's not like bracket 4. You need a higher budget. I would say any of these decks are not going to be a bracket 4 because you just need a higher budget to run like the really broken stuff. You know, like having Fierce Guardianship to protect your Heliod or whatever. We just don't have access to the most mana efficient cards, unfortunately. But this is definitely high bracket 3. Yeah, like if you bring this on your average FNM, this deck is going to do serious work, I imagine. All right, next we have a very popular commander as well. One that I never actually got around to building a budget brew, but now I'm rectifying that. This is Henzie Toolbox Torre. It's the most popular sneak attack commander out there. It's Jund. Each creature spell you cast with mana value 4 or greater has Blitz. The Blitz cost is equal to its mana cost, and Blitz cost you pay costs 1 less for each time you cast your commander from the command zone this game. So Blitz, we cast the creature with haste, and then at end step it will die and draw us a card. And so Henzie just lets us cast our creatures not only for a discount, the mana discount that it keeps increasing the more times we recast Henzie, but also it gives them haste and they die, which is actually a good thing for us, and they replace themselves by drawing a card. All great things. So stuff we're blitzing out are stuff either that wants to die, like Daemogoth Woe Eater hits for somebody for 7, and then when it dies, we get to draw another card, gain life, and each opponent discards a card. Fantastic. Or These are creatures with powerful attack triggers, and the haste is really, really nice here. So, like Archpriest of Shadows enters the battlefield, gives something back up, and it has a combat damage trigger of reanimation, which is great. So hits for 4, gives something back up, so it can also hit and get Death Touch and reanimate. So you could double reanimate off this. And then Tree Shaker Chimera has lovely art. I absolutely love it. It can remove a bunch of creatures, and when it dies, when it goes on the way out, it draws us 3 cards too. So the bulk of the deck is just big, beefy creatures that we want to swing in and hopefully die to draw cards and get value. And then the rest of the deck are just things that feed off this main theme. So Riveteer's Ascendancy. Our Blitz creatures are going to die anyway, so when they get sacrificed, we get to reanimate another creature, put it back onto the battlefield. Whenever we're blitzing out big creatures, we get to discover X with Monstrous Vortex. And then Ziatora, we get to fling the big creatures at our opponent's faces or whatever target, and we get to make treasures at the same time. It's awesome. The deck also gets to run a lot of funky cards, like Corpse Explosion is a really unique style of board wipe that only costs 3 mana. It's super cool. Kethik is also another great way of like, you're sacrificing creatures that want to die anyway because they're being blitzed out, and then you get to put another big creature onto the battlefield instead. Or Bringer of the Last Gift. Once we start like blitzing out and sacrificing a bunch of big creatures, eventually our graveyard's going to be full of big creatures, and if our opponents aren't dead yet, we just gotta cast Blitz out, Bringer of the Last Gift, and just mass reanimate all our dead creatures and wipe the board at the same time too, and that will probably win us the game. So yeah, Henzie is very popular for a reason. It's a very fun play style for a lot of people, just big creatures smash with an aristocrats theme going on to it. And it's also very powerful. Like, it's a super consistent deck, and it does very powerful things. And it's super fun. I highly recommend it. I think this is a very solid bracket 3. All right, I have a confession. I like taking super powerful commanders and making them into memes, and I've done it again. So we had Helga. Now behold Imoti. Imoti, Celebrant of Bounty. Very powerful commander. It has Cascade by itself, and then spells you cast with mana value 6 or greater also have Cascade. So adding Cascade to a bunch of your spells, very, very powerful. No? So why not let's make it more of a meme, shall we? This is an Eldrazi Emerge deck, okay? So the idea here, you see, is we play like whatever creature on the battlefield, and then we play our Eldrazi Emerge creatures. So the Emerges cost less mana than hard casting it. We get to sacrifice whatever, we don't care about that. And then we play a big, stupid creature that is like, they're okay. They're not incredibly powerful, but they're okay. They're very silly though. But they all have high mana value, so they all trigger Imoti, and they're all super silly, and I love them. But what really makes this concept kind of work, actually, is there's a lot of payoffs for running big, dumb, colorless creatures that have high mana values. For example, Kozilek's Unsealing is one of the best cards in the entire deck. It just poops out a lot of Eldrazi spawns, and then if we're playing like our Emerge creatures, for example, we get to draw 3 cards, which is great. Then there's also Emrakul's Influence, which is actually the reason why I built the deck. I've always loved Emrakul's Influence. It does the same thing, it just draws us 2 cards. It's like Omega level power crept by Kozilek's Unsealing. Like, literally, Kozilek's Unsealing does like literally the same thing, better, draws us more cards, and then also makes Eldrazi spawns. So yeah, but you get to run both, and they're both super fun. And then Ugin's Binding, it's like make your own Cyclonic Rift, which is just hilarious. And then we also have the opportunity to run a bunch of really sweet high mana value payoff cards outside of Imoti. So my favorites are Energy Tap and Metamorphosis, which if we have a high mana value creature like an Emerge creature on the battlefield, we can sacrifice it to make mana with Metamorphosis equal to its mana value, which is amazing. Or Energy Tap, we tap it, and then we make mana equal to its mana value anyway. Gilanra, it's a mana dork, and then whenever we're using its mana to cast high mana value spells, we get to draw cards too. And then we have even more fun high mana value matters stuffs. Russian Knowledge, we get to draw oodles of cards. Song of Inspiration, we get to return cards and gain silly amounts of life. And then Conspiracy Unraveler. I forgot this card existed. We get to just cast spells for free by collecting Evidence 10. And again, all our stupid Emerge creatures are like 9-7 mana, so we can easily collect Evidence to cast spells for free with the Conspiracy Unraveler. It's so fun. Okay, so I actually love this deck. I feel like this deck is less of a meme than the Helga deck. It feels more consistent in what it's doing, and obviously it's a Cascade deck, so there is going to be some inconsistency there, but I think overall, this feels less of a meme. I tried to make it a meme. I did. I started with a meme place, and then I found out, hey, this actually might work. So I would say maybe this is actually a bracket 3 deck. I would say maybe this is probably better than your average modern day precon. Maybe it's an upgraded precon, so it's like bracket 3. I did not expect it to be. I thought I was making a stupid bad deck at the beginning that I just wanted to use my emerge creatures, but it turned out there's more support than I expected. So yeah, hopefully you like it. Next, we have one of my personal favorite budget brews. This is Kardur Doom Scourge. Kardur is basically an enter the battlefield super goad effect. It's not technically goad, but it works very similar. All your opponent's creatures have to attack anyone other than you on combat if able until your next turn. So I really like Kardur. I built this deck a long time ago, and my initial attempt was basically the usual most popular route with Kardur, where you play Kardur and you try to abuse Kardur's ability as many times as possible, basically every single turn, and then you give your opponents a lot of creatures of stuff like Genesis Chamber and the Hunted Cycle and stuff like that, and then your opponents will use those creatures to hopefully kill each other with it. So that was my first attempt at Kardur. So when I started playing that version of deck, I immediately came across a slew of sacrifice style decks where, you know, I'm indiscriminately giving everybody free creatures with Genesis Chamber and similar effects. And I was basically just handing the win to sacrifice decks because they just took those creatures as free gifts and sacrificed them for value instead of even attacking. So I found that style of play to have significant flaws. And sometimes it was really good, sometimes it was really weak, but overall, I didn't really enjoy that style of play. So my current version of it is Rakdos Aristocrats. You're playing a bunch of low-cost creatures that have powerful enter the battlefield effects or leave the battlefield death effects, and they are the bulk of your deck. You're trying to curve out with as many of those as possible. So stuff like Greedy Freebooter, when it dies, you scry one, you make a treasure. Patron of the Arts, ETB makes a treasure, and when it dies, makes a treasure. And Clattering Augur, ETB, draws you a card. So that's the bulk of the deck. So we're playing like these sacrifice fodder things. And then we're running a bunch of cheap, efficient ways of sacrificing the fodder for extra value. So Priest of Forgotten Gods is removal and card draw and mana advantage all rolled into one. It's super good. Soldavi Ednit is an oldie, but a very goodie. You just sacrifice black or artifact creatures and make a bunch of mana off them. Vampire Gourmand is a new one that I absolutely love. It just, every single time you're attacking, you sacrifice some fodder, you draw some cards, you deal a bit of extra damage. So that's like the heart of the deck is Rakdos Aristocrats. And then we've got a lot of payoff cards for all this sacrificing too, like Mayhem Devil, just pinging things. Also, if your opponents are playing like treasures or whatever, they just take oodles of damage. Smothering Abomination, you draw more cards. Midnight Reaper, you draw more cards. But what really sets this deck apart is there's so much spice going on. So first of all, since we're a sacrifice deck and we're in red, we get to abuse really powerful threaten effects. These cards like temporarily steal our opponent's creatures. We can swing out with them and we do super amounts of damage, and we're also removing blockers at the same time. But then when we're done with the creature, we get to sacrifice it instead of giving it back to our opponents. So like Seize the Spotlight, usually if you have like a sack outlet on board, Seize the Spotlight just reads in red, 3 mana red, draw 3 cards, make 3 treasures. It's like really that simple. And then heavy hitters at the top end are like Molten Primordial, where we force a threaten effect for each opponent, and then we swing in with all of those things plus a 6/4 with haste. It does so much damage. And also we have a lot of ways of reanimating our creatures very efficiently, and we don't really care about them like sticking around afterwards because we're just going to sacrifice them again. So we have like a lot of like these 1 mana spells that say like when a creature will die this turn, we put it back onto the battlefield. So that allows us to reuse death triggers and enter the battlefield triggers over and over again super efficiently. But one of my favorite old school cards is Wake the Dead. So we sacrifice a bunch of creatures, and then on an opponent's turn, we can reanimate them super mana efficiently. And then they also just die again for us as well, which just, you know, allows us to recycle a bunch more enter the battlefield and leave the battlefield, death triggers one more round super mana efficiently at instant speed. Also, they can be like surprise blockers and stuff. Really, really cool. So the deck is super fun. I actually gifted this deck for Prof to play on Shuffle Up and Play when we did like a budget episode. And honestly, out of the 4, this one is my favorite. I don't think it's the strongest deck out of the bunch, but it is underrated, I would say, just because you're doing a lot of like low impact things on the board, but you're very, very consistent. You're like making a little bit of mana, a little bit of card draw early game very consistently. And then that's kind of spirals into more and more value into mid to late game. And then, you know, like you don't look that assuming, but then suddenly you play Kardur and all of your opponents have to attack each other. They can't finish you off, and maybe they finish each other off. And then you steal their best thing and just kill them with that instead to end the game. So it's very tricksy. It's kind of like, it kind of goes under the radar at tables very often, and it's very consistent. It's not like super high powered or anything. I think it's fine to play against at like precon level decks, like against stock precons or whatever. So I would say it's like high bracket 2, maybe low bracket 3 is where I would be most comfortable playing that sort of power level with this Kardur deck. Not the most powerful deck out of the ones that we're going to be talking about today, but definitely one of my favorite play styles. And I really love Kardur as just like a cool way of like making sure that you survive that turn cycle essentially, and also just randomly killing your opponents with each other's creatures, which is super fun. Next, we got another new one. This is Kotis the Fanekeeper, and this is like Sultai Voltron. Essentially, Kotis is a Villainous Wealth on a stick. When it deals combat damage to a player, you exile the top X cards of their library, where X is the amount of damage dealt. You may cast any number of spells with mana value X or less from among them without paying their mana cost. So the more combat damage you deal with Kotis, the more cards you're going to be stealing off your opponent's library. So the whole point of this deck is to go a big Voltron strategy. We want to pump up Kotis' power to do as much damage as possible. The more damage we're doing, obviously the faster our opponents are dying, which is the number 1 benefit from pumping them up. But the number 2 benefit is we get to cast a whole bunch of spells for free, which is just insane card advantage and mana advantage. Another nice thing about Kotis 2 is it's indestructible, so it has some built-in protection. It starts as a 2/1 and it has no evasion whatsoever, so you have to work to pump it up to make it lethal. But I mean, coming with just baseline indestructible so good, and the card advantage and mana advantage potential is out of this world. So the main heart of this deck is obviously pump spells. We want to be as mana efficient as possible to increase Kotis' power as much as possible. The more power we have, the more damage we're dealing. So one of the most mana efficient pump spells in the format is obviously Invigorate for 0 mana. You give it +4/+4. That's absolutely awesome. We also make sure that a lot of our removal and interaction and even ramp spells are all tied to increasing Kotis' power, so we can get more damage through and also get more Kotis triggers through as well too. So like Ruinous Intrusion, it's 4 mana, which is a lot to just basically disenchant something, but you know, whatever we exile with this effect, it's going to permanently grow Kotis. And then one cool tech card is Inquisitor's Flail. It doubles the damage of Kotis, which is excellent, but the downside is essentially negated with a Kotis deck. Yes, Kotis is going to receive double the damage to itself too, but it's indestructible, so who cares? The other cool cards that we're running are essentially evasion, because Kotis doesn't have any sorts of evasion, so we have to make sure he isn't being chump blocked or whatever. So favor of the over being +2/+2 and flying and vigilance is one of the best ways of getting Kotis through on damage, but also making him an insane blocker. Combat research is also super awesome in this deck, where it gives him ward 1, which is kind of nice, and +1/+1, which is quite a nice, and it's also extra card draw on top, and the security bypass, unblockable, also grows him slowly and gives us some filtering too. Then we also have some synergy cards as to round out the deck. Season of Growth, whenever we're targeting Kotis, and we have a lot of ways of targeting Kotis, we're drawing a bunch of cards in the process. Gaunty, we don't have a lot of theft payoff cards in the deck because I think a lot of them aren't very good, but Gaunty comes out on 4, and then every single spell we're casting with Kotis' ability, we're generating a treasure token, which allows us to dump our hand that that much faster. And it also gives a little bit of a benefit to our opponents to attack each other and not focus on us too much, which is actually quite nice. It's kind of like a Edric effect. And then finally, the last part to round out the deck is we're running a higher average number of board wipes in the deck because Kotis is indestructible. So what better way to make sure that our opponents are falling behind and also they don't have the opportunity to block Kotis than to just wipe the board of all creatures repeatedly. So like Deadly Tempest, for example, we wipe the board. We usually have less creatures than our opponents because we're a Voltron deck. We don't have that many creatures in the deck. So our opponents lose a bunch of life. We lose a little bit of life. And then also we just wipe the board of all creatures other than Kotis usually. So this deck is very, very strong. It's also quite popular in Dragonstorm. I think there's a correlation, by the way, between the top most popular things on EDH Rec at any given time and the ones that have like a very high base power. Like the higher the base power, the base floor of a deck, power-wise, the more popular it is because it's just very easy to get a lot of value out of these type of commanders. And I think there's a correlation between base power and popularity on EDH Rec. And Kotis definitely fits that bill. It's pretty easy to make a very good Kotis deck. And I think a lot of people are recognizing that in casual commander. So yeah, I would say this is automatically, like even a bad Kotis deck is automatically better than a precon just because it has indestructible, so it's fairly difficult to remove all by itself. And then it just provides so much card advantage and so much mana advantage with its triggered ability. So you put those two things together and it's already going to be a problem against stock precon. So I would say this is like a solid bracket 3 deck. And if you further upgrade it, it starts becoming incredibly oppressive. Already though, with $30, it's quite strong. Next, we have a classic. Obviously, we got to bring back Light-Paws Emperor's Voice. This is like a fringe CDH commander. I would say it's a design mistake that it's so strong. But yeah, this is like if you're trying to go for mono white, powerful on a budget, this Light-Paws would probably be the best option for you. This is an Aura Voltron. Whenever an aura you control enters, if you cast it, you search your library for an aura card with mana value less than or equal to that aura with a different name than each aura you control, and you attach it to Light-Paws. So whenever you cast an aura, essentially, you get to tutor up another aura for free and put it directly onto the battlefield. So it's a tutor, it's card advantage because you just double up on every spell you're doing, and it's mana advantage because you don't have to cast it, you don't have to spend mana to cast it, it just directly goes onto the battlefield. So obviously, this is bonkers on a 2-drop, and the most common way of building Light-Paws, justifiably, is Voltron, because I think that is definitely the most powerful way of doing it. So what we're doing, obviously, the bulk of the deck is going to be auras, and we're trying to fulfill basically every single role of the deck through auras. So we have removal with Chains of Custody, we have protection, pseudo evasion with unquestioned authority, and then we can also just nerf the crap out of our opponent's creatures with like reprobation. You slap a reprobation on your opponent's commander, they're going to be super sad with you. And then the rest of the deck is just really powerful Enchantress and Aura payoff cards. So like Pearl Ear gives us a massive discount on all our spells, or Enchantress and Aura spells. And then also, as we're just casting more and more auras on Light-Paws, we also get to draw cards on top of it. Absolutely bananas. Winds of Wrath, a one-sided board wipe. Our aura enchanted stuff all survive. Our opponent's creatures all die. And then we have some new stuff too, like Unfinished Business, where if Light-Paws does die, we can, for 5 mana, just reanimate it and get back 2 auras enchanting it too, so you just bounce back into the game. And then we have our big haymakers to finish things off. Sage's Reverie, a lot of +1/+1 for each aura attached to it. Same thing with Mantle of the Ancients, +1/+1 for each aura attached to it. Sage's Reverie just draws us oodles of cards. Mantle of the Ancients just mass reanimates all auras. And then Ethereal Armor, +1/+1 for each enchantment we control and First Strike. So we slap any of these onto Light-Paws, or we slap like any other aura, same mana value, and then Light-Paws just tutors this up, and then we just probably just win the game, basically. So yeah, Light-Paws, to the surprise of no one, is definitely one of the strongest budget brews you could bring to the table. I would say this is like in the top 3, maybe top 5 range of best budget brews I've got in my arsenal. Definitely At least bracket 3, high bracket 3. I think the budget might keep it away from being truly like bracket 4 level. Maybe it's not fast enough for bracket 4. But I think if people said like we were bringing high optimized decks, high powered decks, what are you going to be bringing out? I don't think you would feel ashamed to bring out Light-Paws to that. So definitely like high bracket 3, maybe low bracket 4. Let's say. Then we got another high powered pairing. This is Malcolm Keen-Eyed Navigator and Breeches Brazen Plunderer. So these partners it looks like just a standard pirate deck, you know. Is it pirates? Malcolm Keen-Eyed, whenever a pirate you control deals combat damage, or non-combat damage rather, whenever a pirate you control deals damage to your opponents, you create a treasure token for each opponent dealt damage. And Breeches, same thing. Whenever your pirates are dealing damage to your opponents, you get to steal the top cards of their library. The main event over here is Malcolm. Just the fact that you can make so many treasures so easily with Malcolm is the main powerhouse of this deck. But Breeches, I would say, also offers a lot to the deck too, just by offering more and more card advantage for you. And I mean, it could also mess up combo decks, you know, if you exile a key combo piece from your opponents too incidentally. So the main thing that we're doing with Malcolm is we're trying to combo off. This is not your average just pirate deck. We're trying to just win the game outright with some 2-card combos. So the most notable one, the one that we splurged a lot of money for because it's almost $5 now, is Glinthorn Buccaneer. If we have these two on the battlefield, we can activate Glinthorn's ability, discard a card, draw a card, and when we discard a card, Glinthorn Buccaneer deals 1 damage to each opponent. So we just attack with Glinthorn, pay 2 mana, discard a card, draw a card, deal 1 damage to each opponent. Because Glinthorn Buccaneer's a pirate and it doesn't specify combat damage, just any damage, Malcolm will say, hey, okay, you dealt 1 damage to each opponent, here's 3 treasures, and then we could just use 2 of those treasures to activate Glinthorn's ability again and again, infinite times for infinite damage, or damage equal to the number of cards we have left in our library at the very least, and that's usually going to be enough to just win us the game. So that's the easiest win con in the deck, but we're also doing some other mean shenanigans obviously too. So Malcolm, we can repeat this same combo with Malcolm. Any creature in the deck that has like a ping ability that's repeatable, like Reckless Fireweaver, whenever an artifact enters the battlefield under your control, it deals 1 damage to each opponent. And then Trigger Charm. So we just turn Reckless Fireweaver, or whatever our repeat pinger is, into a pirate, and then we have any artifact enter the battlefield. Reckless Fireweaver will ping each opponent. Malcolm will make a treasure for each opponent ping this way, and then Reckless Fireweaver will repeat that process, and we'll just have infinite treasure and infinite damage that way. Now, the rest of the deck is utilizing some pirates to get some incidental value and get our engine going so we can find our combo piece and win the game afterwards. I focus specifically on pirates that have a very low mana value and have built-in evasion. So the 1-drops that have flying on them are the best of the best here. We just want to get them out early, and we want to generate card advantage with Breeches and treasures with Malcolm, and keep most of our mana up so we can keep up interaction and deal with our opponent's stuff at the same time. So Siren Storm Tapers, Spectral Sailor, these are all great, and also like the 2-drops pirates that also have built-in evasion, they're all fantastic here too. And if we have a bunch of like evasive creatures on the battlefield, we might as well run like stuff like Coastal Piracy, which is very thematic, but also draws us a whole bunch of cards super mana efficiently. So the deck is incredibly strong and very consistent. So I would say this is like a high bracket 3 deck as well. It can also be kind of underrated because you can make it look a little bit like a pirate deck where, you know, you curve out, you're playing a bunch of pirates, and you play Malcolm, you play Breeches, you're making a bunch of treasures, you're playing more pirates. It looks rather chill, but the thing that really sets it over the edge is it has a lot of slots available for interaction, number 1. And number 2 is it could win out of nowhere. So your opponents won't be able to recognize when you're about to win the game, because typically speaking, all you need to do to win the game is have Malcolm on the battlefield, untap with Malcolm on the battlefield, and then you can play any sort of pinger, any way of turning it into a pirate, and then bam, that's it. GG for your opponents, essentially. So it can steal games out of nowhere, and that makes it very, very scary. So I would say definitely don't play it against precons. Don't play against stock precons. Play out like bracket 3, high bracket 3, And again, if people want to play a high-powered deck, you wouldn't be ashamed to bring this one out either. All right, next we've got another deck that I love so much that it's actually in my paper collection, a slightly upgraded version of it. This is Melek Reforged Researcher, and this is essentially Izzet Spellslinger, but not your typical Izzet Spellslinger list. Like, I love Izzet Spellslinger, it's one of my favorite archetypes, but typically speaking, Izzet Spellslinger is often a Storm-style deck where you have one big turn. You're leading up to one big turn, you cast a bunch of instant sorceries all at once, and you end the game in a glorious fashion. My problem with Izzet Spellslinger, like that Storm-style deck, even though I love it, I'm typically a kind of slow player, and what often happens is when I pop off, I often play solitaire with myself for like 5 minutes while my opponents watch, and I don't want to do that to my opponents. I'd rather not take up that much of their time in one big go, you know? So Melek kind of fixes that role. This is Spellslinger Voltron, where the idea over here is not to take one huge, very long solitaire turn, but rather cast like a single spell each turn, because the first instant sorcery spell you cast each turn costs 3 less to cast, so you're incentivized to only cast like one spell each turn, but like cast an instant on your turn, and each of your opponent's turn to really maximize the mana discount here. And then Melek gets really, really big. Its power and toughness are equal to twice the number of instant sorcery cards in your graveyard. So just naturally, even without like going self-mill or anything, in an Izzet Spellslinger deck, you're naturally going to have in the mid-game like 10 cards and instant sorceries in your graveyard very easily, and then suddenly Melek's just a 20/20. So once Melek's that big, you can just very easily just kill people. So that's kind of why I like this deck so much, is that it's Izzet Spellslinger scratches that itch for me, but it also doesn't yield very long turns. Nonetheless, though, this is one of the strongest Izzet Spellslinger decks I've ever played on a budget. It is absolutely wild. So the main heart of the deck, the reason why we're doing what we're doing, is we want to Voltron kill our opponents. Melek gets really, really big, and then we have a lot of cards in red that utilize his bigness to just outright win the game. One of my favorite is Gravitic Punch, which is just hilarious. You just punch somebody to death. It's essentially like a fling, except you don't have to sacrifice Melek in the process. So when Melek's become a 20/20, Gravitic Punch, bam, you just punch somebody for 20 in the face and they're super dead. Or we swing in with Melek, and then Temur Battle Rage says double strike trample and also gives him +2/+2 when it goes into the graveyard. And then somebody's super dead very easily too. And then even if we're not just like punching somebody in the face, we can cast like Waltz of Rage and just like wipe the board of all opposing creatures, and then there's no blockers, so we just punch somebody in the face afterwards too. So the deck is also a graveyard deck, and there's a couple cool ways of filling the graveyard full of cool instants and sorceries. One of my favorite cards in the entire game is Quiet Speculation. So you can tutor up 3 cards of flashback and put it into the graveyard. So by itself, by just casting Quiet Speculation, you've put up 4 instants and sorceries into your graveyard with 2 mana spell. Faithless Looting, also classic. Mystic Retrieval, also classic. These are all of those flashback spells we can absolutely get with Quiet Speculation. And then the other way we can fill our graveyard super efficiently while furthering our game plan, stuff like Big Score, where we're looting while making treasures. Unexpected Windfall, we're also looting, making treasures. Big Score, by the way, Melek, if we cast it at instant speed on like an opponent's turn or whatever, we can just cast it for 1 red mana, which is excellent. It even puts us up mana in the process. And then we also have like cheeky board wipes, like Ill-Timed Explosion, which double loots and then also wipes the board of the greatest mana value we discarded this way. And typically, even if we have Melek on the battlefield, Melek's usually going to survive any like red mass board wipes too, because he gets so big. Then to put things really into overdrive, we have Cut Your Losses, where we actually just mill ourselves half our library, and that will make the Melek immediately lethal, super lethal. And if we do have a super lethal Melek, we can have backup win conditions too, with like Gandalf's Sanction. We can blow up a creature, and then excess damage is dealt to the opponent's face. So if you do cast like Cut Your Losses or whatever, and you have like 20 or so sorceries in your graveyard at that point, instant sorceries, Gandalf's Sanction is just a burn spell to kill somebody. And then also we have backup Meleks too, like Experimental Overload. They're not as big as Melek. They're not twice the size of your instant sorceries, but they're usually big enough to get the job done anyway. So yeah, I think this deck is super, super fun. For me personally, it's one of my favorite budget brews, and it's also incredibly powerful because It's so resilient. Like, yes, it's very much reliant on Melik, but you don't need anything else to be reliant on. You don't have to have like a big board state or anything. You don't have to have a lot of synergy pieces. You don't have to have a lot of engine pieces or anything. As long as you get stick down Melik and keep it alive, which is what the deck is built around doing, the win is basically inevitable. Like if you untap with Melik a couple times, I think that's GG for your opponents eventually. All right, this is one of my favorite new commanders. This is Mirko, Obsessive Theorist. It's a Dimir Reanimator deck, but it has a lot of unique flavor to it. So first and foremost, this is a Surveil deck. Whenever you're surveilling, you grow Mirko, and then at your end step, you get to reanimate a creature card with power less than Mirko's from your graveyard to the battlefield with a finality counter on it. So you're highly rewarded for surveilling. You want to surveil a whole bunch of times because it's going to grow Mirko naturally. You deal a lot of damage with a flying Vigilancer, so it's very good at attacking and blocking. And then at your end step, you just get to reanimate for free every single end step, which is just so much value on a 3-drop. It's super fun. But that's not the thing I'm most excited about. It's not just I'm excited about it surveilling. Like, that's good. But the thing I'm most excited about is there's one card that I've been kind of obsessed with ever since it got printed, which is Convergence of Dominion. It says, as long as you control your commander, activated abilities of cards in your graveyard cost 2 less to activate. This effect can't reduce the mana in that ability's activation cost to less than 1 mana. And you can also mill yourself to get more stuff with activated abilities into your graveyard. I think this card is just really, really cool and really powerful, but it's incredibly specific. It was printed in a Warhammer artifact deck that focused on Unearth, and Unearth is an activated ability that costs mana. So I always wanted to put this in a deck, but I never had like a strictly Unearthed deck, and I just had it like kicking around as something that's really cool, but I never really had a home for it. And this, my friends, is the home for it. So first and foremost, we are trying to surveil. Surveilling is our primary method of filling our graveyard and also adding to card selection and also growing Mirko. So we have really great, repeatable surveil engines like Gossip's Talent. We're a very creature-heavy deck, so we're constantly playing creatures, and as they're entering, we get to surveil even more. Case of the Shifting Visage is one of the best kind of like graveyard payoff cards, honestly. Just incremental surveil, and then eventually just copies non-legendary creatures that we're casting, and we have a bunch of those in the deck. But the best of the best surveil card is obviously Doom Whisperer, just constantly surveilling 2 whenever we feel like, as long as we pay life for it. And it's also a good reanimator target too for Mirko. There's also some really sweet payoffs for surveilling too. Eye of Duskmantle allows us to cast spells from the things that we surveil, and we don't even have to pay mana, we just have to lose life for it. It also has lifelink, so it gets back some of the life we're losing. Disinformation Campaign is just like this a cool, grindy card that draws us cards and also lowers our opponent's cards in hand too, so it's just a lot of card advantage. Enhanced Surveillance just allows us to surveil more, but also protects our graveyard from exile effects, which is also really nice. And then we have the cards that we're putting into our graveyard. We're surveilling a bunch of creatures into the graveyard, not only to reanimate them with Mirko, but also to activate sweet abilities to use our convergence with. So stuff like Encore, like Anthem Mutineer, where we're just exiling opposing creatures. We even have board wipes of Unearth, like Kederic Leviathan. And also if we reanimate or unearth Canoptic's Tomb Sentinel, it also acts as just spot removal for us, which is really fun. We also have some weird stuff. One of my favorite pet cards that also, again, I've just been hoping to find a great home for is Carrion Net. We can exile opposing creatures at instant speed with the Carrion Net in the graveyard. And honestly, the convergence, making this cost just 2 mana instead of 4 is amazing, because you could actually potentially exile multiple things with Carrion Net. You could respond to its own ability, so you can, exile a bunch of stuff. Obviously, your opponents can pay mana to offset this, but honestly, Surprise Skeleton is just so hilarious. Boneyard Mycodrax, we're a graveyard deck, and we're going to have a lot of creatures in the graveyard. We can scavenge this onto Mirko and then just start one-shotting fools with Voltron damage. And also, Mirko's like a really great card in general, so we can protect that or other important creatures on the battlefield by giving them an indestructible counter with Daring Fiend Bonder. So the deck is like super fun and I think super unique. Like it has an emphasis. Yeah, it's like a Demir reanimator deck, but it has a strong emphasis on surveilling, which is fairly unique. And there's some really cool surveil cards and surveil payoff cards. And also it's like very much like a Convergence of Dawn deck. Like there's a lot of ways of tutoring up Convergence of Dawn. And then once we have it onto the battlefield, we have so many creatures in the graveyard that have activated abilities. So it can really pop off and it's super, super fun. I really like this deck a lot. Power-wise, I think this is like upper bracket 2, low to mid bracket 3. It's doing a lot of really cool things and can have some powerful effects. And obviously Mirko is really, really strong. However, it's not like super explosive. It's not winning out of anywhere. It's not like a super fast combo deck or anything. I think it's a pretty fair deck. So let's say like 2+, low 3. Then we've got another card, commander that I played on Shuffle Up on Play, actually. You might have seen it there. It is Rocco Street Chef. This is a Naya deck that is focusing on Exile Matters. It actually helps the entire table. Everybody gets to exile the top card of the library on each end step, and then they have a full turn cycle to actually play the exiled card. So it's like card advantage for the entire table. However, whenever you, or anybody at the table rather, is playing a land or casting a spell from exile, like the one we're exiling for everybody with Rocco, we get a +1/+1 counter to put on target creature, and we also get to create a food token. So while Rocco is helping the entire table, we're benefiting a lot more from this ability than anybody else, and that's where the fun begins. So this is actually an Exile Matters deck, a food deck, and also a +1/+1 counter deck, which sounds like too much to handle, too much on the plate per se. And typically I would never recommend you build a deck that has like multiple themes to juggle. However, in this particular case, somehow it actually all works together, and you'll see how. So first and foremost, the heart of the deck is Exile Matters. We want a lot of cards that exile and benefit us from exiling. So stuff like Wild Wasteland is card advantage for us, but also just triggers Rocco and other Exile Matters stuff. Our board wipes are unique, like Volcanic Torrent. We are a very low curve deck, so we can cast a couple spells and cast Volcanic Torrent, and then Cascade triggers our Exile Matters stuff, which is really good. And then even like our spot removal is also exile based too, like Transforming Flourish. We get to remove something and then we demonstrate and copy it and do it again. And also an opponent gets to remove something too. They can't remove anything that we control though, so it's just extra value for us, honestly. And then whatever is replaced by it, like we remove a thing and then whatever gets removed, the controller gets to cast something from exile. Well, guess what? That triggers Rocco. We get to make more +1/+1 counters and more food tokens. Then in terms of +1/+1 counter payoffs, we've got a lot of really cool ones. Asgard Artisan makes treasures, Duskling Duelist draws cards, and Evolution Witness just constantly regrowths over and over again. So these are amazing targets for Rocco. And then in terms of the food / token payoffs, Balin does a whole bunch of stuff with it, turns into mana, draws cards, or grows Balin. Samewise can sacrifice a food to regrow things from the graveyard. And we even have some Anthem effects, some Anthem / ramp effects with Night of Sweet's Revenge. We can tap our food for mana, which is absolutely amazing. And once we have a critical mass of these food, we can just turn it into an overrun effect and just start murdering people with it. So the deck is actually super different. It's trying to juggle 3 different themes together, and I swear to you, it actually works. It works. Everything blends in well enough. Everything overlaps well enough. I played it on Shuffle Up and Play. It did very well. I was very happy with how it was doing. I play tested this deck a bunch of times because obviously I brought all 4 decks to Shuffle Up and Play, and I played it with some friends beforehand to make sure everything was running smoothly. And yeah, this deck runs very smoothly. I'm very, very happy with it. Very solid bracket 3 deck. It's not doing anything like unfair, but it's doing a lot of really cute things, and all those things add up to a really, really cool deck. Next, we have another deck that you're also going to be seeing on Shuffle Up and Play. You might have seen it on Commander Clash as well. And also, it's a deck that I gave to the people over at Card Market. So if you follow Card Market, if you see an upcoming Shuffle Up and Play with this, if you see it on Commander Clash, this is my deck. It's Sergeant John Benton. It's not my deck. I didn't invent this card, but it's like in my deck list, rather. Sergeant John Benton is what are the strongest budget brews you could bring down to the table? And it's something that kind of goes under the radar for people because it's like, it's a Doctor Who card. It wasn't a very popular set. And I don't know, it's just not a very popular commander. Or it should be more popular than it very much is. This is a Voltron commander. It has triple haste. And whenever it deals combat damage to a player, you and that player each draw that many cards. So it's kind of group huggy. You could kind of see it as like a secret rendezvous effect where whoever you hit is getting a lot of benefit. You're helping that person. But in truth, what's really happening is John Benson's dealing commander damage to people, getting them closer to lethal, to dead. And yes, they draw cards, but you're drawing that many. And our deck is actually built around taking advantage of drawing a lot of cards because our curve is incredibly low. And we're actually a Voltron deck. We're trying to turn all that card draw into super mana efficient pump spells. So the heart of the deck are cards that pump John Benson, but also give him evasion, because he has trample already, which is already good, but like flying and stuff is even better. And then also protects John Benson. This is the most important thing, is protection. So Groundswell for 1 mana, give a +4/+4. That's 4 more cards drawn for you. Flare of Faith, +3/+3, but also indestructible because John Benson's a human. Griffspoon, +1/+0 is very minor in the grand scheme of things, but it also gives him permanently flying, which is great. And then what we really want to be doing is we want to get a turn 2 Benton out as much as possible. So our ramp is particularly geared towards getting a turn 2 John Benton, and we're doing that with like turn 1 ramp sources like the Mana Dorks, like Skyshroud Ranger and Arbor Elf. The Ranger is particularly good though, because you can play turn 1, turn 2 you could ramp out a land and you could get John Benton out, and we're drawing so many cards that we're always going to have lanes to put onto the battlefield with the Ranger. And then once John Benton is on the battlefield, we could continue ramping further with stuff like Swell Growth, which is a cool like cross between a pump spell and a ramp spell, which is really nice. And then to round out the deck is like interaction. So we have board wipes that basically get rid of everything but John Benton. Promise of Loyalty gets rid of everything but 1 creature for each person, but they also can't attack you with those creatures. Single Combat just gets rid of everything but John Benton and whatever else. And then since we're so card draw heavy, we're basically the only thing that's pinching us is mana. We draw so many cards, more cards than we could ever cast. So anything that is super mana efficient is something that we really like Abolish. We don't care about discarding extra planes from our hand because we always have too many like planes in our hand, too many whatever in our hand. So we might as well cast stuff for free and go down in card disadvantage because we're drawing too many cards anyway. So a free disenchant is just like S tier in this deck. So yeah, John Benton is a house. It's incredibly oppressive. It's very simple to pilot, and it's definitely like upper ranges of bracket 3, this list by itself, even though it's incredibly budget friendly. I think this is something that if you do throw more money into it, it could definitely be a very scary bracket 4 deck. But with $30, like upper tier bracket 3, though, even if people are saying, let's play a bracket 4 game or whatever, let's play high powered, you wouldn't feel overclassed or whatever having a John Benton on the battlefield like a $30 brew. It's that strong, really. We've got another new Universes Beyond commander. This is Shao Jun. This is basically Izzet artifacts, but like a very, very different style of Izzet artifacts. So it's just a 3/3. It has flying first strike on your turn, so the evasion is nice. But the main thing over here is that we can tap artifacts to deal damage to our opponent. So it's a ping deck, and it's specifically pinging our opponents by tapping artifacts. So how are we doing this? We're doing this a couple of different ways, but the best ways are stuff that don't care about being tapped down. Like we can slap down a Goldvein pick onto our commander, generate treasure tokens because it already has evasion, so it's pretty easy to generate tokens off the equipment. And then we could tap down the equipment with Shao Jun. It doesn't matter if the equipment is tapped or untapped. We're getting the value out of it anyway. And then there's even some artifacts that benefit us from being tapped down, like Blink Moth Urn. Blink Moth Urn helps everybody by ramping them equal to the amount of artifacts they have. But if we tap them down after our turn, then when it's on our opponent's turn, it actually stops working. It's actually like turned off when we do that. But like the best cards are the ones that can poop out artifacts super, super efficiently, like Forensic Gadgeteer. That's like amazing because the clue tokens, again, don't care if they're tapped or not. The best payoffs to all this shenanigans of pinging are cards like Curiosity. Curiosity doesn't specify combat damage, so pinging each opponent for 1 means we're drawing cards equal to the number of opponents that have been damaged this way. So 3 opponents draw 3 every single time we ping with Shao Jun. Same thing with Tandem Lookout. And Sigil Sleep is particularly oppressive. Whenever we ping an opponent, we get to bounce one of their creatures too, which is woof. So good, so good. And then we have like cute little things. I couldn't help myself. Obviously, we're running the indestructible lands like Silver Bluff Bridge, so that we can top it down with Shao Jun if we don't need the mana, but its main purpose is to be cheeky little Izzet ramp, where you can like target it with your Cleansing Wildfire, and the Silver Bluff Bridge is indestructible, it doesn't get destroyed, but we just get to ramp out a basic land, put it onto the battlefield, and also draw a card, so it's like an Omega level rampant growth in our deck. And we have multiple ways of tutoring up the artifact lands too, like Loyal Inventor. So it's cheeky, but I swear it's actually very good. So this deck is a very cute deck. I wouldn't say it's a very strong deck. I would say it's like a solid bracket 2 deck. It has some powerful plays, but it's not doing anything particularly scary or spooky or winning very quickly or anything like that. It's a very, very fair artifact deck, if you call artifact decks fair. But yeah, it's very fun. It does a lot of like cute little pingy stuffs, and I love cute little pingy stuffs, and I love Izzet. Now we come to Talrand, and Talrand was actually the very first budget brew I ever made. I believe it was like 2012 or 2013 was the first budget commander I ever wrote / main, and it was Talrand. It's a very simple commander. It's like an OG mono blue spellslinger commander. You just cast instant sorceries, you make a bunch of drakes, and then you punch people to death with your drakes. It's very short and sweet and simple, but very effective at what it's doing. So what are we doing with Talrand? Well, what I love doing with Talrand is I love casting instant sorceries that specifically cast more instants and sorceries for us. I feel like that's something that is underrated in the Spellslinger archetype. These type of cards that can, you cast them, they do something good for you, but then they cast other instant sorceries for you, so you just get more Spellslinger triggers. That's just really, really good. So like Hidden Strings is one of the best. You can untap like 2 lands or whatever, so it's ramp for you. Then you cipher it onto a Drake, you swing in with the Drake, and then you get to cast Hidden Strings again, over and over again, to generate more and more mana, usually, and then also just more Drakes with Talrand. Arcane Height, same thing, another cipher card that I love. Stolen Identity, another cipher card. I just love cipher cards. I think they're just so cool, and they're especially good in a Spellslinger deck that has evasion, like Talrand. There's other cards also that multi-spell, if you will, like Press the Enemy can disrupt our opponents, either bouncing a spell or a non-land permanent, and then boom, we get to immediately cast something else. Brawl's Expertise, bounce a whole bunch of stuff, then cast something else. Reenact the crime, cast a spell that you then get to cast another spell from the graveyard that just went into the graveyard. Double Talrand triggers for all of them. It's awesome. I love these. And then for payoffs, we're also like a token deck. So Invasion of Segovia, giving all our non-creature spells Convoke is just super amazing because we'll have a bunch of tokens laying around. And then speaking of evasive tokens, Curiosity Crafter just allows us to draw oodles of cards. And then non-token stuff that's still spellslingery, Eluge, which arguably is stronger than Talrand if you want to have just like the best mono blue spellslinger combo. It's still great in the 99 here too. It just gives us a huge mana discount to our instants and sorceries. And we're mostly draw grow, so casting a spell on everybody's turn is pretty easy. We have mostly instants in our deck. So yeah, this deck, again, not one of the strongest decks out there, but it does a lot of really cute things, and I have a lot of nostalgic appeal to this for me. Like, it's the very first budget brew I ever made, so it has a place in my heart that I'm never going to give up. Even though, like, maybe Illusion is stronger or whatever, this is probably like a bracket 2 plus maybe if you really optimize it. But it's super fun. I don't know. It has a lot of little cute things that I like. I like the drakes. They're cute. Okay, it turns out I really like aristocrats as budget brews because we got another one. It's Teysa Karlov. This is Orzhov aristocrats, and I think it's the most popular aristocrat commander. Mostly because of its triggered ability. It's basically Panharmonicon for death triggers. If a creature dying causes a triggered ability of a permanent you control to trigger, it triggers an additional time. What's not to love about that? Just double the value. And then creature tokens you control have vigilance and lifelink. So this is an Orzhov Aristocrats deck. It's all about having your creatures die. And then it also has a theme of creature tokens. We specifically want creature tokens because then Teysa also buffs those up too. So the reason why I built this Teysa Karlov deck is actually it's inspired by a very recent card that I absolutely love, which is the Sipsig Ceremony. So this just came out in Dragonstorm. It's a legendary enchantment that says creature spells you cast cost 2 less to cast. Awesome. And whenever a creature you control enters, if you cast it, destroy that creature, then create a 2/2 black zombie druid creature token. So just a flat 2 mana cost reduction on all our creature spells is really, really strong, really powerful for a 3-drop. But the drawback is that if we cast a creature, it immediately dies. And we get a 2/2 token out of it. So the whole point of this deck is basically to find the Sipsig Ceremony and build around it. So we're first of all filled with ways of tutoring up the Sipsig Ceremony because this is what the entire deck is built around. So it's a legendary, so Search for Glory can find it. Thalia's Lancers can find it. And Grim Servant is very cheap, and I don't think it's played that much, but it's super good. Like, getting a Devotion card of 3 black is pretty easy. You just need Grim Servant and then 2 more black pips, and suddenly you can find the Sipsig Ceremony as an ETB trigger for 4 mana. That's really good. So once we have the Sipsig Ceremony on the battlefield, we're playing creatures that just want to die. They have good death triggers, because if we get Teysa Karlov on the battlefield too, then we just double the death triggers of all of these. So like Greedy Foodbreeder, doesn't have a mana reduction to it, but basically if we have Sipsig on the battlefield, the ceremony on the battlefield, Greedy Foodbreeder enters, immediately dies, we scry 1, make a treasure, and make a 2/2. And then if we have Teysa on the battlefield, we do double that, which is super awesome. Or Junji, it will only cost 3 mana with Sipsig on the battlefield, and it will immediately die. And typically speaking, we're going to try and reanimate something and lose 2 life. If we reanimate something, we're not casting it, so whatever we reanimate is going to actually stick around, and we circumvent the destroy clause of the Sipsig Ceremony. And then if there is nothing to reanimate, we could just be mean and make everybody discard 2. That's not super bad. And then also stuff like Outlaw Medic, when it dies, we just draw a card. It's just good. For 1 mana, we just get a death trigger, make a 2/2, draw a card. That's not bad at all. And then there's obviously also a heavy token theme. We have a lot of things that when they die, we get to make a bunch of tokens. So Ogre Slumlord, for example, non-token creatures dying, we got 1/1 rat creature tokens. Hallowed Spiritkeeper, probably the best out of all of them. When it dies, we get to make a whole bunch of spirits equal to the number of creatures we have in the graveyard. And then like Field of Souls is really old, but very cool here. Whenever non-token creatures are dying, we make 1/1 Spirits of Flying. Super cool. And then we also build around the fact that all our creatures are going to be like dying instantly once we have Sipsig Ceremony on the battlefield. So if we have, for example, Luminous Broodmoth on the battlefield already, then whenever we're playing a creature, it will die, sure, but then the Broodmoth brings it immediately back to the battlefield with flying on it. And then same thing with Nightmare Shepherd, like something will die, okay, great, and then it immediately comes back as a 1/1 token copy of that creature. And then of course, like, it also has Vigilance and Lifelink if we have our commander out. Lisa is just a way to constantly loop our creatures. Like, we play it dies, and it goes back to our hand, so then we can play it, and it dies, and we go reuse it over and over again. Honestly, I think this one's the best out of all of them, because we get to reuse the ETB triggers really efficiently, and we can just do it over and over again. And yeah, the entire deck is basically built around the Sipsig Ceremony, and it's all about basically death triggers, obviously, death triggers, tokens, and then ways of reanimating. Because like, let's say we have the Sipsig Ceremony on the battlefield, but then we want creatures on the battlefield to stick around. Like, let's say Teysa's not on the battlefield. We really want Teysa on the battlefield. We can play Teysa, it will die, and then we have a bunch of ways of reanimating her. So this deck is like super fun. It's not entirely reliant on the enchantment. Just the enchantment is what brings it to the next level and is just the most fun card in the deck. So there's a lot of ways of tutoring it. And there are some ways of reanimating it in case it does get blown up. But if it's gone, if it's like exiled or whatever, it's not like the deck is unplayable. It's just now just a very solid Orzhov Aristocrat deck, but it just so happens to really pop off when we have that legendary enchantment on the battlefield. So I think it's like a unique twist on Teysa Karlov. Teysa Karlov is pretty bread and butter for Orzhov Aristocrats, and then focusing on that enchantment just makes it a little bit more spicy, you could say. Then we've got another Teysa. Okay, so I really like both the Teysas, but I swear these are very different styles of decks. So the last Teysa was straight up Orzhov Aristocrats, and this Teysa is Orzhov Drain. I noticed a lot of decks are running this Teysa also as Aristocrats. This deck is not Aristocrats, my version at least. So this Teysa says, at the beginning of your end step, investigate for each opponent who lost life this turn. So if you have 3 opponents, and each of them lost 1 life, at least, then we make 3 clue tokens, which is very good for a 3-drop. And then whenever a clue you control is put into a graveyard from a battlefield, you create a 1/1 white and black spirit creature token with flying. It only triggers once each turn. So Teysa, for just 3 mana, it can basically every single turn cycle make 3 clue tokens if we have consistent ways of draining our opponents. And then when we're sacrificing our clues either to draw cards or for other things, we're just amassing a bunch of 1/1s who then can attack and make our opponents lose life. And then, it feeds into Teysa's investigate ability. So this is not an Aristocrats deck. It barely has anything that worth sacrificing or anything. It's not sacrificing our creatures for value, really. But this is all about life drain. Basically, this is a life drain deck, not an Aristocrats deck. So number one, first and foremost, we want consistent ways of draining our opponents, because then we can very efficiently trigger Teysa's ability and make 3 clues every single turn. That's like the key here. So the best ones are the ones that can do it very easily and consistently and are 2 mana. So we can curve out. We can go like turn 2, one of these drain effects, and then turn 3 Teysa, and immediately make 3 clues on our end step. So Sanctum of Stonecans, one of the best ones in the entire deck, because it's very consistent. It doesn't require anything of us, and it's an enchantment, so it's hard to remove. Shepherd of Ra just taps, makes everybody lose a life. Excellent. Drug Recycler requires us to sacrifice something. Typically, we just have a clue lying around, and we sacrifice a clue, and we ping everybody. It's all good. Then we do have some ways of sacrificing specifically our clues for value, like Rite of Oblivion. A lot of our removal spells are like sacrifice an artifact, and you get like a really good undercosted ability. So Rite of Oblivion is one of the best ones for it. And when we're sacrificing our clues, we also fuel our Vat of Rebirth, which is a really cool synergy. And we also have other things that play off our clues just being super numerous and just being artifact tokens just laying around, like Inspiring Statuary. It's like the best ramp spell in our entire deck, because every single turn, essentially, we're making 3 clue tokens, and all of those are essentially mana rocks when Inspiring Statuary on the battlefield, because we don't really have that many artifacts in the deck. And then to win the game, we actually have a variety of win conditions. One is Merchant of Truth. Like, once we have a bunch of clues on the battlefield, we just give one of our random flyers, like the Merchant or any of our spirits, Exalted, and we just smash for oodles of damage. Mirkwood Bats fits the drain theme when we're creating and sacrificing our clue tokens and making our spirit tokens, and possibly sacrificing those too. Our opponents their life total just plummets super fast. But my favorite of the bunch is probably the most toxic of the bunch too. Persuasive Interrogators. Suddenly our clue tokens become poison counters for our opponents, and we can poison them out that way. Very cute. So yeah, that's the deck. I would say this deck is super consistent. It's quite reliant on our commander, but our commander is a 3-drop, and we have numerous ways of reanimating and protecting it. And as long as it's on the battlefield, we have so many ways of draining our opponents, and the drains work double time in our deck. Obviously, they make clue tokens super consistently, but they're also our win condition. Like, we just drain our opponents to death. So there's just like a lot of really cute synergies in the deck. It's super low curve. It has a lot of redundancies, a lot of consistency, a lot of protection and interaction, and all things that I very much enjoy. And it's also not an Aristocrats deck. It's a drain deck, so it's a nice change of pace from the typical black decks that I like to play. And yeah, I actually built this deck in paper. It was a budget brew of mine. I loved it, but my partner loved it even more. before, so I actually gifted it to him, and he's upgraded it ever since. But it's a deck that I also love playing still, too. So I'll grab it from him every once in a while and still play it myself, too. The next deck is very different from the last one, which is slow and grindy value. This one is big, explosive, dumb stuff. This is the Gitrog Ravenous Ride. It's Go Tall Sacrifice. Go Tall Aristocrats, you could say. It's Golgari, and basically the whole point of the Gitrog is we saddle it up with a huge power creature, smash in with the Gitrog, sacrifice the saddled creature, and then we get to draw cards and play lands from our hands equal to the creature's power. So we, like, if we have an 8-drop that we saddle with, or sorry, an 8-power. So if we have an 8-power creature, we saddle with the Gitrog. We're going to draw 8 cards, then put up to 8 lands from our hand directly onto the battlefield with the Gitrog's combat trigger, which is absolutely ridiculous. So yeah, the heart of this deck is big power creatures that we want to sacrifice to the Gitrog. The more mana efficient, the better. That's all we really care about. So like Kalaskion, it's not a great creature, but it's a 3-mana, 7-power creature. So we saddle it with the Gitrog for 3 mana, essentially. A 3-mana investment. We draw 7 and put up to 7 lands onto the battlefield. Daemogoth Titans, one of the best. For 4 mana, we get 11 power. And Yorgul and Meltani, the best of the best for the meme value alone. 6 mana, we get to draw 18, play up to 18 lands when we sacrifice it to the Gitrog. So super, super fun things. Absolutely insane. And when we're doing all of this stuff, we're putting so many lanes onto the battlefield so quickly. Obviously, we have a little bit of a landfall synergy. Avenger of Zendikar is a great option here. Blackblade Reforged turns anything into an Omega level threat. And I mean, we could even just Voltron kill people with our commander at that point. And then we also have some other like cheeky landfall stuff like Quest for the Necropolis. If we play this on the battlefield and we do 1 combat trigger with the Gitrog, it's already ready to be cracked for 1 black mana and reanimate anything. Super, super good. Now, basically, as long as we hit with our commander a single time, we're like super ahead in the game. That's all we need to do. So it's in our opponent's best interest to stop us from doing that. And then therefore, it's in our best interest to just protect the Gitrog, because as long as we get that 1 hit in, we are basically set for life. So Horrid Vigor is a very cute one because it gives the Gitrog indestructible. That's the primary use for it. But it also gives a Death Touch. And now, typically, speaking, Death Touch is not that interesting for most decks, but our commander is a combat trigger and it has trample, and Death Touch works really well with trample. If our opponents throw a bunch of blockers in front of the Gitrog monster and we give it Death Touch, then we only have to deal 1 damage to each of our creatures, thanks to the Death Trigger is already lethal, and then the rest of the damage, thanks to trample, can go over and hit our opponents, get that combat damage trigger, and we get our value anyway. And then we have the other cheeky ways of protection, like Agonisar Rex. It's a 5-mana 8/8, so we can just hard cast it and then sacrifice it to the Gitrog. We're super happy with that. But we can also just hold it up, cycle it, and pump up the Gitrog and give it indestructible at instant speed. So I love the versatility here. And then super mana efficient ways of protecting the Gitrog too is like Supernatural Stamina. Like, okay, you killed the Gitrog, well, it comes back. Or we could just Supernatural Stamina, something we sacrifice to the Gitrog in preparation, so that when it dies, it just immediately comes back and we can sacrifice it next turn too. So the deck is super strong. I've seen the Gitrog played many, many times at this point, and it is unfairly powerful. It is, I would say, a design mistake as well. It's too strong. Like, you just hit with somebody 1 time, and then you're way ahead in cards and mana. And it's at that point, like, if you keep hitting with people with the Gitrog and you keep doing your thing, then there's absolutely no hope for your opponents. But just one hit, and you're like super ahead of the rest of the table. It's so silly. This is absolutely a bracket 3 deck. Do not bring it to bracket 2 tables. It will be unfair. Okay, the next one is another aura deck that's fairly new. It's Boros auras with 3-Dog Galaxy News DJ. The whole idea with 3-Dog is that we put a bunch of creatures onto the battlefield, including 3-Dog. We enchant 3-Dog with some sweet auras, and we go attacking. We attack with all our creatures. We sacrifice one of the auras on 3-dog, and then we get to put a copy of that aura onto all our other creatures. Essentially, this is basically a more chill version of Arna. Your Boros Arna, but more fair, right? Arna just says you attack with everything, you don't have to pay mana or whatever, you just double all the auras on the attacking creatures, whatever. 3-dog's more chill, you know? You have to pay mana. You can only do it once per turn, but it is a 3-mana spell as opposed to, I think Arna's like 5 or so. So there is some upside to him. But the main thing is, like, you want to play auras, but you don't want to be as oppressive as Arna. You go for 3-dog. So we're doing similar shenanigans with as Arna, but we're doing it Boros style. A particular thing of note, though, is any auras that ETB make tokens, creature tokens, are particularly good here because those are more creatures that we can then enchant with 3-dog's ability. Like, it scales up in the amount of creatures we have. So Cartouche Solidarity is really cool. Then we have just really cool ETB triggers like Itali's Favor. We put that on 3-dog, we get to discover 3, and then when we sacrifice it and put it on our other attacking creatures, suddenly all of them also get to discover 3 too. So it's an amazing value. Same thing with like Chains of Custody. ETB, we remove something from the game, and then we sacrifice it. Sure, that thing comes back, but then we get to exile like a whole bunch of extra stuff when we copy it. Ooh, I'm missing a card over here. Oops-a-daisy. But basically, the other heart of the deck, the support of the deck, are particularly any Enchantress support cards that make tokens. So like Ajani's Chosen, Ghostly Dancers, and then there's Archon of Sun's Grace, that I think is the one that didn't appear in my slides. But basically all of these are whenever an enchantment enters the battlefield, you make a creature token. So 3-dog's ability makes auras enter the battlefield, and that will trigger a bunch of tokens with these type of cards. And then the next time we attack with 3-dog, we have even more creatures that we start enchanting with, and we snowball that way. And then finally, there's other really great payoffs. Sage's Reverie, I've already mentioned a bunch of times, but there's also red payoffs for auras in 3-dog that we haven't seen before, that I haven't mentioned before at least. Armory Paladin is just like card draw whenever auras are being casted, and Grim Reaper's Sprint. It doesn't work particularly well with 3-dog because you have to be in a main phase to get an extra combat, but nonetheless, even if you're not copying it with 3-dog or whatever, extra combats mean extra rounds of 3-dog's triggers, attack triggers, and also just your opponents are gonna die, like straight up. So yeah, it's a sweet card, even though it doesn't have like maximum synergy with our commander. So yeah, the deck is very sweet, very consistent. It's an Enchantress aura deck, so like, yeah, it's great when our commander is on the battlefield. It really snowballs super hard if our commander sticks around, but the archetype is so deep and so powerful and so consistent that you don't actually need your commander to stick around in order for it to do very well. Like, as long as your commander is on the battlefield, you're probably going to be winning the game in short order, but if it's not on the battlefield, it's totally fine. The deck still functions. So I would say this is like a high bracket 2 again, maybe like a chill bracket 3. Okay, next we have a deck that is absolutely not chill. This is Zada Hedron Grinder. This is like one of my favorite old budget brews, one of the first budget brews I ever did even. And this is basically Goblin Go. It's not Goblin. It's Go Wide Token Storm, I would say. You try to amass a bunch of creatures on the battlefield, and then you chain a bunch of spells, you swing in for damage, and you win the game that way. The way it works is, as Zada says, whenever you cast an instant or sorcery spell that targets only Zada, you copy that spell for each other creature you control that the spell could target. Each copy targets a different one of those creatures. So the game plan is very simple. We play a bunch of creatures. We play Zada, then we target Zada with an instant or sorcery, and then Zada copies that instant or sorcery for each other creature we control, so we get maximum value out of our instants and sorceries. So step 1 is we get creatures on the battlefield. We do this a couple different ways, actually. So step number 1, most obvious way, is making tokens. A 2-drop like Dragon Father comes with 2 creatures. That's just good mana efficiency. Ornithopter is another way. Like, it's a 0-drop that puts down a creature. That's incredibly mana efficient to get our creatures on the battlefield, our creature count up. And then we have less efficient, but also incredibly useful and powerful in the deck, our mana dorks. So like Hedron Crawler. Okay, you spent 2 mana to get a single creature, not that great a rate, but it taps for mana. So it lets us progress our board state much faster. It gets our Zada out, it gets our creatures out faster, and then we do cute things with them, and I'll get back to that soon. So once we have creatures on the battlefield, we have Zada on the battlefield, it's time to pop off, it's time to storm off. Step number 1, we want to draw cards. So we target Zada with any type of card that says target creature does whatever, and we draw a card. We're playing it mostly for the card draw, but extra utility is fun too. So Ancestor Anger draws us a card and gives the creature trample, expedite, haste, and draw a card. Spark of Creativity, just draw a card. It's impulse draw, essentially. It doesn't do anything else for us. But basically, if we have like Zada on the battlefield and like 4 other creatures, for example, all of these are like, we target Zada, we draw 5 cards. Like, it's that simple. It's very silly for 1 mana. And obviously, card draw doesn't do anything with us unless we have the mana to actually pop off. So the next part of the deck is actually just generating mana. And we're doing it again by targeting Zada and making mana out of that most of the time. So stuff like Ancestor's Aid and Sudden Breakthrough, we're making a treasure token for each creature we control. And then we get to cast more draw spells and pop off like that. There are a couple cards that are more like rituals as opposed to targeting Zada for value in cheeky ways, like Battle Hymn. So if we have 5 creatures on the battlefield, we cast Battle Hymn for 2, we gain 5 mana, so we're up 3. Now, I said mana dorks are particularly powerful in this deck, and the reason why is we're running a couple threaten effects that we're actually targeting Zada with, and we're getting a lot of value out of them. So, for example, Traitorous Greed and Involuntary Employment, we target Zada with it. We'll untap all our creatures, give us haste, and then for each creature, Traitorous Greed will give us 2 mana, and Involuntary Employment will give us a treasure token. So, like, let's say we have 6 creatures on the battlefield, we target Zada with Traitorous Greed, we're going to make 12 mana, which is absolutely ridiculous. Untap all our creatures and give them haste. So if we have mana dorks on the battlefield, we could tap the mana dorks for mana, and then Traitorous Greed will untap our mana dorks, and we could tap them for more mana as well too. So that's even more mana on top of it. And then to win the game, the most obvious way of doing that is actually combat damage. We just pump up all our creatures so they deal lethal damage. The best one is Fist of Flames. It gives it a ridiculous power boost, draws us a card, and gives us trample, so it's good at any point of popping off. But we also have other ways of winning the game if combat is not going to do the job. Like, for example, somebody casts like a fog or something like that. Gutter Snipe, we're casting a bunch of instant or sorceries. If we drop down Gutter Snipe, it is another body for Zada, but also we're casting a bunch of spells. Eventually, all our opponents are just going to lose life and lose the game that way. And Kick in the Door is a cute one too. You can actually venture through the dungeon in a way to drain out all your opponent's life totals. So if you have a critical mass of creatures, you need a lot of creatures to do this, but you could go through certain dungeons and certain orders to just drain out all your opponent's life totals, and that's a very funny way of circumventing a lot of fogs and stuff too. So this deck is incredibly powerful. It's incredibly explosive, and out of all the decks I've covered, this deck wins the fastest if it is not interacted with. At low interactive metas, this is the strongest budget brew I could recommend to you because it could win like turn 4 or so fairly consistently. Turn 5, maybe at latest turn 6. If you have a really bad start for some reason, turn 6 would be the absolute worst. But it is a really fast deck. Now, the downside for Zada, though, is it folds so hard to heavy interactive metas. In red, you just don't have a lot of good ways of protecting your board. There are a couple in this deck, but not that many. And even if you increase the budget, you'd still have that issue of like instant speed removal on Zada or just a lot of board wipes before you can actually cast Zada and pop off and win. It's going to set the deck way, way behind. So it's a very, very fast deck. It's the fastest deck out of all of these in terms of winning the game. And it could win and be incredibly unfair at low interactive tables. But at high interaction tables, this is not a good pick because you're just going to get Zada sniped and then you're going to be way too slow and you're not going to do anything this game. So it's all in on Zada, but you're in mono red, so you don't really have that many tools to protect her. So yeah, I would say this is definitely a bracket 3 deck. Don't bring it against stock precons. I don't think they'll have a consistent amount of interaction to stop you. But it's definitely not like a bracket 4 deck or anything, because at bracket 4, I would hope people are bringing enough interaction to stop you. And at that point, Zada's just not going to do anything. But it's a super fun deck. It's one of my favorite decks. It's just like Goldfish. It's essentially a solitaire deck. It doesn't really care what your opponents are doing entirely in this game. It just wants to do its own thing. So it's a really fun Goldfish deck. If you just want to solitaire by yourself, it's very, very fun. Or if you just like your opponents watching you play, it's very, very fun too. Okay, so that was 30 decks under 30. Goodbye. Just kidding. I made some extra decks. I actually made some extra decks by accident. I didn't count the 30 correctly, but I'm still going to keep the title. The YouTube title is very clickbaity, 30 decks under 30. It's a very good title. I'm not going to say 32 decks under $30. It's not going to roll off the tongue as well. So whatever. These are bonuses. Congratulations for finding them. So the first one is Zimone and Dina. Zimone and Dina, Sultai Aristocrats Lanefall. That is basically what it's doing with some drain on top of all of that. Again, I love aristocrats, apparently. All of these budget decks are aristocrat decks, but they're all different, I swear. So this one, Sultai, it's moist dirt, and the payoff for aristocrats over here is actually generating a bunch of extra lands, and then we use those lands in various ways, and we're also draining out our opponents at the same time. So Zimone and Dina, whenever we draw our second card each turn, target opponent loses 2 life and you gain 2 life, and we can tap it, sacrifice another creature, draw a card. You may put a lane card from your hand onto the battlefield tap, but if we control 8 or more lands, we repeat this process once. So if we have 8 or more lands, we get to draw 2 cards and put 2 lands onto the battlefield, or up to 2 lands up onto the battlefield, basically. And this kind of feeds, or Zimone's ability feeds into this secondary ability too. So the heart of this deck is, surprise, surprise, sacrifice fodder, as any good aristocrats deck. But we have some really cute ones. So for example, Primal Druid specifically wants to die. It wants to die so it can ramp you. But then there's also a lot of cards that don't really care whether they live or die after they've done their thing, like Coiling Oracle. It has an ETB trigger, and then it's just a 1/1 sitting around. So we just might as well sacrifice it to Zimone and Dina. And then we can be a little bit cheeky too. We can have like evoking a Shriek Maw, for example, evoke it for 2 mana. It's going to the graveyard anyway, but before it will die, before that that trigger resolves, we just sacrifice this Zimone and Dina, so we get maximum value out of it. Zimone and Dina's ability is also a tap ability, so the more we're untapping Zimone and Dina, the more we can utilize its ability and really pop off. The best of the best is definitely Sting, the Glinting Dagger. It gives Zimone and Dina haste, so like if we have to recast or something, we can immediately equip her and then start utilizing her ability, but it untaps her on everybody else's turn. So as long as we have sacrifice fodder available to us, we can activate Zimone and Dina not just on our turn, but on everybody's turn. So in a full turn cycle, if we have 4 people at the table, that's 4 activations of Zimone and Dina instead of just 1, which is just like insane amounts of card draw, insane amounts of drain effects, and insane amount of lane ramp. It's just super good. But then also cards like Scrib Ranger can do the same thing, and it can activate Zimone and Dina every single turn too. Yes, we have to return a forest back to our hand, but typically speaking, if we're activating Zimone and Dina so much, eventually we're going to run out of lanes to play with Zimone and Dina's ability anyway. So returning a land is actually not that big of a deal, because then we just replay that over and over again, and it will trigger Lanefall for us. So sometimes it's actually a good thing. And then same thing with Instill Energy. Whoa, I messed that one up. This is a long recording, folks. This is a long recording. This is Instill Energy. It's a very old card, and reading the card does not explain the card, I don't think. It basically gives the creature haste, and you can untap the creature once per turn, I want to say, on your turn? Something like that. I don't know. Look up the Oracle test. It's really good, though. And then, okay, so for payoffs, there's various payoffs for doing our Zimone and Dina things. First and foremost, Lanefall. So we have stuff like Rampaging Balos, which, surprise, surprise, makes big old tokens for us that we can attack with, but we can also sacrifice to Zimone and Dina and keep the party going. Same thing with Joriel. The second card we draw each turn, we get to make a token, which we can then sacrifice to Zimone and Dina. But as we're doing our thing and we're drawing tons of cards, eventually we just dump all that mana into an overrun effect with Joriel's ability. And also, as we're sacrificing things, we might as well drain for even more with stuff like Vran. We only want to sacrifice one thing per turn, like on our turn and our opponent's turn. So Vran's ability is just like a super blood artist effect, because we don't want to be sacrificing a bajillion stuff. Well, I mean, we do if we want to combo off, which we'll get to in a bit. But Vran is really good if we're playing fair. We have other cards to infinite drain if we are comboing. Speaking of combos, Zimone and Dina plus any landfall card that makes a creature token for us, like Zendikar's World. There's a couple in the deck. We just saw Rampaging Battle, so that's another one. And then any bounce land, like Golgari Rot Farm, there's 3 bounce lands in the deck. Any bounce land and Retreat to Coral Helm is an infinite loop of basically drawing your deck, infinite landfall, and possibly infinite drain if we have like an infinite drain payoff at the end too. The way it works is we sacrifice a creature to Zimone and Dina. We play the bounce land as the land we put in with Zimone and Dina's ability. That will trigger Zendikar's World to make another creature token for us. And it will also trigger Retreat to Coral Helm, which we can use to untap Zimone and Dina. And then we could just do that again. We return the bounce land to itself to its hand. So like we play the Golgari Rot Farm, and then we have to bounce the land back to our hand. We bounce the Golgari Rot Farm back to our hand, and then we just do this over and over again for infinite sacrifice, infinite landfall, and hopefully also infinite card draw. And hopefully in that whole situation, we're going to draw our entire deck. We hopefully find an infinite drain effect, and then we just win the game that way. So yeah, it's very good. So yeah, this deck is super consistent. The only downside to this deck is essentially it's very reliant on our commander. It's all in our commander. Everything about this deck is built around our commander being around. The upside to this, though, is first of all, we have some protection spells for Zimone and Dina, but also we're a lands deck, right? So if we're ramping a lot, which this is what the deck does, this deck is just ramp.deck essentially, we can recast Zimone and Dina a whole bunch of times. It's just a 3-drop. It's nothing for us. So yeah, that's a deck. It's super consistent. It has a lot of really good card draw and ramp. Like card draw and ramp is literally what it does, and it utilizes that card draw and ramp to just win the game with like combos and drain and all that good stuff. So I would say this deck is like a very, very solid bracket 3 deck. Maybe like a low bracket 3. Like it could play against precons, but as long as the precons are focusing down the Zimone and Dina and know that that's a serious threat. It's like relatively slow to get off the ground, but like by turn 5 or 6, it really has like a ridiculous engine going. So I think it's a very solid bracket 3. Okay, the other bonus deck I want to talk about is Azure the Enchanter. This is one of the oldest budget brews I had too. Azure the Enchanter, whenever it attacks, you get to tutor up an enchantment with mana value 3 or less and put it onto the battlefield. My favorite thing to do with Zur, the most powerful thing is get like Necropotence, whatever. My favorite thing to do with Zur, though, is play it cycling. So we attack with Zur, and we tutor up either Astral Slide or Astral Drift. Astral Slide and Astral Drift, they do the same thing. They say whenever we cycle a card, we get to exile target creature and then return that card to the battlefield under its owner's control at the beginning of the next end step. So even if we don't have any creatures of our own that we want to be blinking with Astral Slide, we could use this to basically say our opponents never get to play with their own creatures ever because we're a cycling deck. So we just cycle and then just exile all our opponent's creatures temporarily. They come back at end step. They're not gone forever. But like if they want to attack us, we could just exile potential attackers. If our opponents need our commander on the battlefield to do things, we just exile it every single time. So they never get to play things at sorcery speed with it on the battlefield. It's just an obnoxiously powerful enchantment. There's 2 of them, and Zur can just find them. So these are kind of like the secret commanders for the deck. The rest of the deck is just cycling goodness. The vast bulk of the deck is just cycling cards. We have hyper efficient cyclers like Eagles of the North. You can plane cycle for just 1 mana. And then we also have like cyclers that when we cycle them, we got a good effect out of it. Like Complicate, we can force spike something that's very cute. And Nibble Obstructionist, we can stifle something, which is also very cute. There's a focus specifically on creatures with cycling as opposed to instant and sorcerer cycling, because creatures in the graveyard mean we can set up big mass reanimation turns, and we're going to get to that a little bit later. The other stuff that we're going to be doing is we're going to be doing blink stuff. Astral Slide, Astral Drift, both of them are basically blinking, delayed blink effect, and ideally we target our own stuff to get a lot of value out of their enter the battlefield and leave the battlefield triggers. So Cloud Blazer, draw cards, gain life, Shriek Maw again is removal, and Archaeomancer can get instant sorcery from our graveyard back to our hand. This is particularly good if we're for like cycling instant sorceries, because we can cycle them early, and then if we actually want to cast them, we can get them back with Archaeomancer, or we can just cycle them again, whatever. And then we also have really powerful cycling payoffs. Fluctuator is one of the best. For 2 mana, suddenly all our cycling spells cost 2 less to cycle. So a lot of our cycling spells are exactly 2 mana, so you can cycle them for free. New Perspectives, 6 mana, draw 3 cards, and then as long as we have 7 more cards in our hand, we just cycle for 0 mana, just straight up. Awesome. And then we can also turn all our cycling into 2/2 Drakes, as long as we have additional mana to spend on them with like Drakehaven. Then, for winning the game, we have a bunch of cards that are creatures that just grow as we're cycling or discarding cards. For example, Flourishing Fox just grows. It also has cycling 1, so if we don't need it, we can just cycle it and get it back later or whatever. Scrounging Skyray is a new one. And we can also just make our opponents extra miserable by cycling a bunch of cards with Archfiend of Ifnir, and we just one-sided wipe all our opponent's stuff over and over again. It's essentially like the cycling version of Tux, real. But it just affects our opponent's stuff. It doesn't affect our stuff at all. It's very, very mean, and our opponents will not be able to have creatures on the battlefield as long as Archfiend's on the battlefield. Yay! So this deck is obnoxiously strong. Obviously, the soft point for it is the Astrals. If the Astrals get removed or exiled is really, really bad for us. But if it just gets destroyed or whatever, we have ways of returning it back to our hand or recasting it. It's not that big of a deal. It's super consistent because like Xur just finds our key pieces very consistently, and cycling decks are consistent in general because we're just cycling through our deck. We see most of our deck every single time. We find our lane drops when we need it. We find the cards we need whenever we need them. It's good. My only word of caution here is that it can feel a little bit obnoxious and oppressive to play against if you're like a creature heavy deck and you don't have the answers to Astral Drift or Astral Slide. Just the person, your ability to just exile those creatures over and over again at a whim can be rather difficult to deal with. So that's something to keep in mind. It might not be the most fun deck to play against, but I find it fun. I mean, if you're piloting this, oh boy, is it a blast. Okay, the last deck I have for you. So instead of 30 decks, we have 33 decks. The last deck is not a $30 deck. I actually increased the budget to $50 because it was a really sweet concept, and I felt like I wanted a higher budget to play with it. This is actually a deck that I'm aiming to gift to Seth in Vegas. So this is a secret commander deck. It is a Norn the Wary deck. However, it's a Naya version of Norn the Wary. Norn is a very exciting card. It's a very unique card and a cool old school card. Whenever anybody plays a spell or a creature attacks, you exile Norn, and then it comes back at the next end step. So basically, every single turn, essentially, it exiles itself and then comes back to the battlefield. Exiles itself, comes back to the battlefield. It does that on everybody's turn. So in a full turn cycle, it's exiled itself and came back to the battlefield 4 times if it's a 4-player game. And it's also incredibly difficult to interact with because if you try to like kill it or whatever, it just gone and then comes back afterwards. So it's a very funny, very resilient card, and it's a fun card to build around as a mono red commander. However, when you're mono red, you're very limited to what type of payoffs you have for Norn's ability. But we got around this by going Naya. And the way we got it to be Naya is we're playing Rocco Cabaretti Kardur. This is basically when we cast it, we get to search our library for a creature and put it directly onto the battlefield. So for 4 mana, we can cast Rocco and immediately put Norn onto the battlefield. And yeah, Norn's not technically our commander. However, we're not dealing commander damage with him, number 1. Number 2, we almost never need to actually recast Norn because it's so difficult to interact with it. So it's essentially our commander, but we have access to Naya colors, and then also Rocco can tutor up other things too, other ways. So in terms of payoffs, first and foremost, we're doing the mono red thing. Mono red is all about when a creature enters the battlefield, we burn people. So we got Impact Tremors, we got Witty Roastmaster, we got the stuff that mono red Norn can do, but we also got some extra spice outside of mono red. Like Arbaz is the best out of all of these, honestly, because when our historic permanent, which is what Norn is, it's a legendary permanent, enters the battlefield, not only do we ping everybody, but we also gain life in the process too, which is super awesome. So it's the best impact tremors out there. And then we have even more fun things. Just outside of burn, we're doing cool things. For example, our ramp package is incredibly unique. Whenever Norn's blinking in and out, we're generating treasures with Galadriels, We're growing here in Blade Elite, so it taps for more and more mana, and we're making treasures with Rose Room Treasurer. And in terms of card draw, our card draw is also incredibly unique too to Norn. Welcoming Vampire, Tokasia's Welcome, and Soul of the Harvest. All of these work perfectly with Norn because every single time it's blinking and coming back, we're drawing a card. We also have other really cool utility cards. Gimli and Legolas, they care about legendary creatures entering the battlefield. Each of them get grow and +1/+1 counters when we're doing that. And also, Gimli is making us treasures when we're smacking people. Legolas draws us cards. But they become super huge threats very, very quickly as Norn, the legendary creature, keeps entering and leaving the battlefield. So that's awesome. And then stuff like Warden of the Grove, for example. Whenever Norn's entering, we can endure X. And make a bunch of spirit tokens. So we make a huge token army, which feeds our impact tremors, which feeds our other stuff, and it really snowballs out of control. And then other cool things we're doing is we're a little bit of a blink package. So since Norn is basically a blink style commander, we kind of built the rest of the deck around blinking too. So for example, Samwise Gamgee, whenever Norn or another creature is entering the battlefield, we're making foods. And then we could use those foods to return stuff from the graveyard. Reclamation Sage, it's just an ETB creature. So most of our creatures are just ETB creatures. And then we might as well go all in on blink at that point and run stuff that, mass blinks our creatures for even more value, like another round. So this deck is super, super fun. It's basically Naya Blink. Like, it's the blink archetype put into Naya colors, but being built around Norn is just so fun, and it's just like, it can get out of hand very quickly. It's not a weak deck at all because Norn is so hard to interact with. It's very hard to shut down Norn specifically. And there's like so much redundancy here. There's so many cool cards that work specifically well with Norn blinking in and out every single turn. It's really, really fun. But I found that when I was building it, I wanted it to be a $30 deck, but there were too many cool cards that are just kind of expensive that I wanted to run in to showcase how cool Norn is, but I just didn't have access to. So I broke the rule here. Not really, though. I broke the rule to make it $50, but these are just bonus decks. Again, you can't be angry at me at the comment section like, oh no, you didn't do 30 decks under 30. No, I did 30 decks under 30 plus 2 more under 30, and then this is an extra one just on top of it if you're interested in a higher budget style deck that's still budget, I guess. All right, friends, and that's 30 decks under $30. Secondly, 32 decks under $30 plus a bonus $50 deck, but whatever, I'm keeping the title. It's a good title. But yeah, as I mentioned before, I would highly recommend, if you want to save money on actually assembling any of these decks, go through bulk piles. Go through bulk piles. Most of these cards are just bulk cards. They have to be by necessity because almost all of them individually are less than $1. So they're bulk by definition. So you're going to find most of them in bulk bins, either in your own bulk bins if you have a lot of Magic cards laying around like I do, or if you know any Magic players who have just big collections like I do, which is most of them, honestly, if you played for like more than a year. Sadly. Or worst case, you go to a game store and they're going to have bulk bins for sure. So you're going to find most of the cards over there. That's going to save you a ton of money on like shipping and all that stuff. But yeah, hopefully that helps you on your journey towards building budget brews. Hopefully I convinced you all to go through your bulk bins and give those bulk cards just sitting around a home. They're just sitting around in unsorted piles, just collecting dust. You might as well use them and make kick-ass decks out of them. So hopefully that helped you out. Like and subscribe if you like this sort of stuff. This took me a long time to make, by the way. Many days to craft all these decks. So be sure to share this to your friends and stuff. I don't know. Like and subscribe if you like this sort of stuff. Hopefully it helps people out. Let me know in the comment section below what budget restriction you like too. Do you like $25, $20, $50, $100? What's budget for you? Let me know in the comment section. All right, bye.